If this book were revealed to the Jianghu, it would undoubtedly ignite a bloody war for its possession. Mastering this book meant command over two skills, pressure point combat and healing. Grace Flowers opened another book. It too contained illustrations and text, this time depicting a figure in meditative posture. This book detailed methods for cultivating internal energy. The strength of one's internal energy was a crucial measure of martial arts prowess. For a martial artist, this cultivation manual was an invaluable treasure. The third volume specializes in hidden weapons and light body skills, with the last few pages containing a swordsmanship technique. Any one of these 3 books would be enough to benefit someone for a lifetime. They are rare treasures, seldom seen in a century. Yet, the original owner obtained them with such ease. With the help of these secret manuals, it's no wonder the original owner could raise her martial arts to the 5th level in just 3 short years. Oh, it seems these are all martial arts manuals. Mother, do you want to practice martial arts? Jason Lawrence saw Grace Flowers engrossed in the tattered books, curiously flipped through them, and noticed figures wielding swords in the illustrations. You recognize these characters? Grace Flowers heard Jason Lawrence softly reading the annotations on the illustrations and looked at him in astonishment. The annotations were in traditional characters, and Justin was only 4 years old. Children his age were typically in preschool, having learned very little, yet he could recognize these complex characters. Mother, I started recognizing characters and learning martial arts when I was 2. Jason Lawrence lifted his small chin, proudly declaring, the teachers all say I'm a genius. I only need to learn something once, and I can even deduce other things from it. Suddenly having a genius son with special abilities, Grace Flowers wondered if she'd hit the jackpot. Furthermore, thanks to the original owner, she now possessed these books. It felt like someone had secretly arranged for her survival in this place. Grace Flowers frowned. Could her arrival in this time not simply be about finding the Phoenix Dragon Goblet? Who was the man who told her to come to this time and find the Phoenix Dragon Goblet? She had never seen his face, only heard his voice and glimpsed a hazy figure. But judging by the warm voice, he must be a young man. Wait, she finally remembered why she felt a sense of familiarity the first time she heard Justin Lawrence's voice. His voice was very similar to that man's. Because she hadn't seen the man's face, she had only paid attention to his voice, leaving a deep impression. Similar voices, and their figures seemed somewhat alike too. But, one person in ancient times, the other in modern times, 2 different timelines, could there be a connection? She had a nagging feeling that something was strange, but couldn't pinpoint what it was. Was she being overly suspicious? I already know almost all of these acupuncture points. Jason Lawrence was engrossed in studying the book in his hands, mistaking it for a guide to acupuncture points. Justin, let's study these books together. Grace Flowers stopped dwelling on the uncertainties and focused her attention back on the secret manuals. Okay, Mother. If you don't understand anything, just ask me. I'll tell you where the acupuncture points are. Jason Lawrence clapped his hands in delight. Little Spirit, curled up on Jason Lawrence's shoulder, suddenly flew towards Grace Flowers, hovering before her and opening its wide mouth to reveal a small, red pearl. Mother, Little Spirit says if you want to cultivate internal energy, you can eat one of its spirit pearls. It can greatly increase your internal energy. Jason Lawrence reached out, took the spirit pearl from Little Spirit's mouth, and offered it to Grace Flowers. Grace Flowers accepted the spirit pearl. The thought of consuming something regurgitated from a snake's mouth made her feel slightly disgusted. If others knew that Grace Flowers was disdainful of this priceless treasure, they might cough up blood and die. Little Spirit, seeing Grace Flowers hesitate with the spirit pearl in her hand, worriedly hissed. Mother, Little Spirit says you should eat it quickly. If you don't eat it within a quarter of an hour, the spirit pearl will lose its effectiveness, Jason Lawrence hastily translated. Well, so this treasure has an expiration date. Grace Flowers couldn't help but chuckle. Closing her eyes, she placed the spirit pearl in her mouth and swallowed. The spirit pearl, as if possessing life, carried a surge of energy that coursed through her internal organs, particularly gathering as a potent, simmering force within her dantian. Reflexively, Grace Flowers sat cross-legged, closing her eyes. Her consciousness, seemingly with a will of its own, guided her breathing in the circulation of energy within her dantian. Gradually, she regained control over the chaotic power within her body. "Whoa, Mother's head is smoking!" Jason Lawrence exclaimed as a wisp of white smoke began to rise from his mother's head, gradually enveloping Grace Flowers entirely. "Quiet! Quiet! Don't disturb the master," Little Spirit hurriedly intervened. Jason Lawrence quickly covered his mouth, not daring to speak further, only widening his eyes as he watched the smoke envelop Grace Flowers. The white mist gradually dissipated, revealing Grace Flowers' figure clearly. Opening her eyes, a sharp light flashed within them, her face bearing an expression of joyous surprise. Her martial arts skill had broken through to the 6th level. Although still at the early 6th level, for a martial artist, being able to break through a level in such a short time was unheard of. Even for those with exceptional talent and natural gifts, from the 5th level onwards, each breakthrough could take no less than 10 years, becoming increasingly difficult with each advancement. Within the Great Gene Dynasty, those who reached the 7th level could be counted on one hand. Yet, Grace Flowers, at only 18 years old, had already reached the 6th level. If this were to spread, it would undoubtedly shake the entire Great Gene Dynasty. Until now, such an astonishing martial arts prodigy had never appeared. "Mother, how do you feel? Do you feel a surge of power throughout your body?" Jason Lawrence, recalling his own sensation after consuming the spirit pearl, hastily inquired. "Yes, very good. This spirit pearl is truly a treasure." Grace Flowers nodded. Because she had spent 3 years studying this fundamental manual in her past life, upon reviewing it again, the memories of it residing within her mind were restored. Even without looking at the manual, she could now rewrite the entire text without missing a single word. She possessed an extraordinary memory, practically photographic. Coupled with the fact that her meridians had been opened by the mysterious person 3 years prior in her past life, surpassing ordinary human physique, her martial arts training, combined with her sharp mind and unique constitution, resulted in doubly effective progress. "This seems like fun. Mother, I want to practice swordsmanship too," Jason Lawrence said, looking at the book containing the sword techniques, fascinated by the illustrations of the figures wielding swords. These sword techniques appeared even cooler than the Western swordsmanship he had previously learned. Grace Flowers picked up the book and examined the sword manual. It appeared to be a set of techniques that balanced offense and defense, both aspects perfected to the extreme. Mastering this swordsmanship could grant one dominance in the martial arts world. "Come, let's go to town and buy a sword," Grace Flowers said, rising immediately. She quickly placed the items Jason Lawrence had taken out back into the chest, placing the 3 books at the bottom. Kept here, they would be absolutely safe. She trusted that Justin Lawrence wouldn't rummage through this chest. "Hooray, little spirit, let's go downtown and buy a sword." Jason Lawrence clapped his hands excitedly. Little spirit, also infected by Jason Lawrence's joy, automatically crawled into his pocket, only revealing its snake head. Grace Flowers pushed the chest under the bed, clapped her hands. This bedroom, besides her and Justin Lawrence being able to freely enter and exit, only Ruby Willow came in to clean the room. This chest, placed under the bed, was very safe. "Alright, let's go." Grace Flowers then took some silver fragments, copper coins, and bank notes from the dressing table drawer. These were all prepared by Justin Lawrence's housekeeper for her to spend. Justin Lawrence was quite generous. Leading Jason Lawrence out of the room, Ruby Willow was waiting outside. "Ruby Willow, no need to prepare lunch for us, we'll eat out." Grace Flowers looked at the sun. There was still some time before noon. Going downtown was just in time for lunch. "Yes, Your Highness, please wait a moment, I will go prepare the carriage. Ruby Willow didn't ask much, seeing Grace Flowers nod, she immediately retreated to arrange the carriage. From Serenity Prince Mansion to the streets, even by carriage, it would take more than half an hour, if walking, it wouldn't take less than an hour to arrive. A moment later, a carriage was seen heading this way, the driver on the carriage was the same guard who had driven Grace Flowers out before. Ruby Willow walked alongside, she was now Grace Flowers' personal maid, she softly asked, "Your Highness, do you need me to attend to you and the young master?" Chapter 28, Offering Unsolicited Kindness, No Need, Will Go, Oh right, the chest under the bed, if the prince returns, tell him it's some small toys I brought from my maternal home. Grace Flowers instructed. Yes, Your Highness. Ruby Willow nodded. Grace Flowers carried Jason Lawrence onto the carriage, then lightly jumped in herself, sat firmly, and said to the guard, "Let's go." The guard replied with a sound, then raised his whip, and the carriage slowly headed towards the main gate. Sitting in the carriage, the contents of the 3 secret manuals flashed through Grace Flowers' mind. Thinking back now, it had to be said, these were absolutely world-shaking treasures, she must keep them safe. Although Justin Lawrence was favored by the Emperor, because in everyone's eyes he was a frail person, without any martial arts cultivation, he was the only one among the princes without any real power. However, she could affirm with absolute certainty that Justin Lawrence's martial arts cultivation was unfathomably deep, even she, now at the early 6th rank, was no match for him. He concealed too many secrets. Lost in thought, the carriage arrived at the crossroads of the streets. "Your Highness, where would you like to go?" The guard stopped the carriage and asked. "It's fine to get off here." Grace Flowers got out of the carriage, carried Jason Lawrence down, and instructed the guard, "You go back first, come pick us up in the evening." "Yes, Your Highness." The guard turned the horse around and sped off. The streets were bustling with traffic and pedestrians, it was lunchtime, the aroma of food wafted from the tea houses and restaurants, stimulating the appetite. "Jason, are you hungry? Do you want to eat first?" Grace Flowers held Jason Lawrence's hand, strolling leisurely. Jason Lawrence rubbed his belly, smelling the aroma, he felt his stomach rumbling, a gurgling sound emanating from the boy's belly. "You little glutton, all right, let's go have lunch first." Grace Flowers chuckled, glanced around, and headed towards the nearest restaurant. As soon as they stepped into the restaurant, a waiter enthusiastically rushed out to greet them. It was lunchtime, and the restaurant was bustling with diners, leaving few empty seats. "Miss, young master, are you two here for a meal? Please, have a seat this way." The waiter, seeing Grace Flowers carrying no luggage, knew they were only there to eat, not to stay the night. The waiter led Grace Flowers to a secluded corner where there happened to be an empty table. "Miss, may I ask what you would like to order?" The waiter inquired while pouring tea for Grace Flowers. "Bring me some of your house specialties." Grace Flowers replied softly, observing the restaurant and paying attention to the conversations around her. "Certainly, miss, please wait a moment." The waiter replied cheerfully. He preferred serving straightforward customers like her. The restaurant was crowded, and the clamor of conversation filled every corner. "The annual martial arts assessment assembly is coming up soon, but I heard it's been postponed for a month, right? This year has a leap 7th month, so it'll be postponed by a month, meaning it'll be held in the 9th month. It's currently the 6th month, so there are 3 months left until the martial arts assessment assembly." The young man sitting across from the middle-aged man calculated. "I wonder how many people will be able to advance this year. Heavens, I've been training hard all year, and I'm still only at the 2nd rank, beginner level. It seems like there's no hope for me in this lifetime." The middle-aged man frowned and sighed. "Don't be so hasty, uncle. Cultivating martial arts isn't something that happens overnight. Just take it slow." The young man offered comfort, but a hopeful smile played on his lips. He was determined to advance in this year's assessment assembly. Grace Flowers pricked up her ears, listening to the conversation at the next table. Memories of the martial arts assessment assembly surfaced in her mind. It was a fair and impartial martial arts assessment competition held annually by the imperial family. Anyone could participate, as long as they were a citizen of Great Gene, be they commoner or noble. It could be said to be the most grand and lively competition in Great Gene, with almost the entire population participating. Weapon shops have been doing booming business lately. The middle-aged man took a sip of tea and spoke again. Indeed, everyone is preparing for the assessment assembly. For martial artists like us, weapons are more important than anything. The young man nodded, his face filled with regret as he said, "Yesterday, I went to the exhibit house weapons shop, wanting to commission a large saber, but they said their commission schedule was fully booked for the next 6 months. That's to be expected. The exhibit house is the #1 weapon shop in Great Gene. The weapons they craft are all of top-notch quality. If you want to commission something from them, you either need power or money. Otherwise, don't even think about it." The middle-aged man wasn't surprised. The exhibit house was a coveted prize in Great Gene, and everyone desired a weapon crafted by them. "Yeah, I'll just have to commission it somewhere else." Sigh. The young man sighed, lamenting his lack of both money and power. Such was the way of the world. Exhibit house armory. Grace Flowers' eyes lit up. Excellent. As a server brought out some signature dishes, Grace Flowers ate while listening for useful information from the neighboring table. A smile played on her lips. As expected, tea houses and taverns like these were the best places to gather intel. After lunch, Grace Flowers asked the server for the exact address of the Jean family's exhibit house armory, then left the tea house and headed towards her destination. A large, iron, double-edged sword sign was planted beside the door, engraved with the shop's name. The words, "Exhibit House Armory," were painted in striking red. Grace Flowers stood at the entrance, peering inside. The interior was simple, a vast space with all manner of weapons displayed on the 4 walls. "Mother, let's go look at the swords." Jason Lawrence, upon seeing so many weapons, excitedly dashed into the shop. People constantly entered and exited the armory, hopeful upon entering, disappointed upon leaving. The shopkeeper gave them all the same answer: the order book was full, no more commissions were being accepted. Grace Flowers entered the shop. Seeing a few people at the counter still pleading with the shopkeeper for commissions, she and Jason Lawrence browsed the weapons displayed on the walls. The busy shopkeeper, attending to customers, noticed Grace Flowers and Jason Lawrence examining the weapons. He paused, then hurriedly retrieved 2 portrait sketches from a drawer in front of him. He breathed a sigh of relief. This young woman must be the one he'd been waiting for. The shopkeeper instructed an assistant to take over with the customers, then took the 2 portraits and walked towards Grace Flowers. "May I ask if the young lady is of the Flowers family?" The shopkeeper bowed slightly as he approached Grace Flowers. Grace Flowers turned, taken aback. Did this shopkeeper know the original owner of her body? Impossible. Besides the Flowers family servants who attended her, very few outside had seen the original Grace Flowers. Her father, Henry Flowers, never took her out. She was left in the Flowers estate, her movements confined to her courtyard. Only Philip Bennet occasionally visited and showed her the outside world. "I am Grace Flowers. Does the shopkeeper know me?" Grace Flowers raised an eyebrow, a hint of suspicion in her voice. "Young lady, please follow me. I have something to deliver to you." The shopkeeper glanced down at the boy looking up at him curiously, and felt certain. These 2, one adult and one child, were the ones he was meant to wait for. With that, the shopkeeper gestured for Grace Flowers to follow and led the way. Confused, Grace Flowers trailed behind the shopkeeper, her mind racing. "Shopkeeper, what is it you have for me? Who asked you to deliver it? Please be patient, young lady. I will explain everything shortly." The shopkeeper led Grace Flowers into a room furnished like a parlor. "Please, have a seat." Grace Flowers sat down as the shopkeeper handed her the scroll he'd been carrying. She accepted it hesitantly, unfurled it, and froze. The people in the portrait were herself and Justin. Grace Flowers, her gaze inquisitive, looked towards the shopkeeper, silently awaiting an explanation. "The story goes like this," the shopkeeper began. 2 months ago, a young gentleman commissioned 2 swords from our weapons shop, paying 1,000 taels of gold. Upon leaving, he left these 2 portraits, instructing us that a young woman accompanied by a child would come to purchase weapons. If the woman matched the portrait, we were to give her these 2 swords. Having finished his explanation, the shopkeeper went to the back of the room and returned moments later carrying 2 long boxes, one large and one small. Grace Flowers, startled by the shopkeeper's explanation, gazed at the lifelike portraits before her, a myriad of questions swirling in her mind. Why would someone spend 1,000 taels of gold to commission swords for them? And how did this person know she would come to this particular weapons shop to order swords? The order was placed 2 months prior. If it was intended for the original owner of this body, why was a sword prepared for Justin as well? Justin had only arrived in this time a few days ago. Could this person have foreseen Justin's arrival 2 months in advance? A growing sense of unease washed over her as Grace Flowers scrutinized her own portrait. The eyes in the painting, though seemingly gentle, held a hidden sharpness, a subtle air of authority despite their apparent vulnerability. These eyes, identical to her own, depicted not the original owner of this body, but her. "Shopkeeper," Grace Flowers asked urgently, suppressing her mounting questions, "what did this young gentleman look like? How old was he? Could you perhaps sketch his appearance?" "I'm afraid not," the shopkeeper replied, recalling the young man who had commissioned the swords 2 months prior. He wore a wide-brimmed hat, obscuring his face. His voice suggested youth, and he was tall and slender. His curiosity piqued, he added, "Young lady, do you not know who gifted you these swords? They are worth 1,000 taels of gold." Grace Flowers glanced at the long boxes on the table, her brow furrowed. Should she accept this extravagant gift from a mysterious benefactor, or refuse it? Chapter 29, A Man Shouldn't Kiss Casually. This is the Dark Legacy sword, forged by our top swordsmith. Its length, width, and weight have all been crafted to your specifications. Young mistress, please examine it to see if it suits your liking. The shopkeeper opened the large box. As the lid lifted, a cold, metallic light emanated from within, revealing an exquisitely crafted longsword resting on a layer of silk. A thumb-sized piece of jade was inlaid on the scabbard. Grace Flowers reached out and grasped the hilt. It fit her hand perfectly. Lifting the sword, she found it light enough to wield easily. Slowly, she drew it from its scabbard. A cold light flashed, forcing her to squint. Once her eyes adjusted to the dazzling metallic gleam, she opened them fully. The blade was slender, thin as a cicada's wing, and sharp enough to seemingly cut iron like mud. This blade is forged from 1,000-year-old Xian iron, a rare treasure. Young mistress, you must safeguard it carefully against thieves and prying eyes. A fine sword. Though not a connoisseur of swords, Grace Flowers had to admit that this blade, both in its appearance and the feeling it gave her in hand, was immensely satisfying. Indeed. The gentleman who commissioned it must be well versed in swordsmanship. He provided the design for this Dark Legacy sword. Furthermore, he instructed us not to forge any duplicates. In other words, this pair of Dark Legacy swords is the only one in existence. The shopkeeper spoke with pride. Their weapons shop was renowned for its integrity. A promise made to a customer was a promise kept. Their weapons were reliable. Mine is the mother sword. So, the one in the smaller box is the child sword, correct? Grace Flowers sheathed her sword, placed it back in the box, and then opened the smaller one. Precisely. The design is identical, differing only in size. This child sword is perfectly suited for this young master. The shopkeeper nodded. Justin, this is your sword. See if it feels comfortable. Grace Flowers pushed the box towards Jason Lawrence. Jason Lawrence eagerly reached out and grasped the sword within, happily swinging it a few times. Mother, I love this sword, he exclaimed. Thank you, shopkeeper. If that gentleman returns, please convey my gratitude to him. Grace Flowers rose and addressed the shopkeeper. Rest assured, young mistress, I will certainly relay your thanks. Hearing Justin address the young woman as mother, the shopkeeper was taken aback. This young woman looked no older than 15 or 16. How could she have such a grown child? Thank you. We'll take our leave now. Grace Flowers retrieved the child's sword, which Jason Lawrence was now holding adoringly, and placed it back in the smaller box. Holding both boxes, she nodded farewell to the shopkeeper. Safe travels, young mistress. The shopkeeper rose and personally escorted her to the shop's entrance. Upon exiting, Jason Lawrence immediately snatched his box containing the child's sword. Mother, I'll carry my own sword, he declared. Practice diligently when we get home, understand? Grace Flowers smiled, seeing Justin's joy. Children were easily captivated by novelty. She rarely interacted with boisterous children like Justin, finding them whiny and arrogant, a nuisance to be around. But Justin was different. He didn't behave like a typical 4-year-old. Instead, he was like a little adult, requiring no special attention, utterly endearing. She found herself growing fonder of him with each passing day. Of course. Once I master the sword, I can protect mother. Jason Lawrence nodded vigorously. Protecting his mother was his and his father's duty. Good boy. My love for you is not misplaced. Grace Flowers bent down and kissed Justin Lawrence's chubby cheek. Mother, I'm a little man now. I can't be kissed casually. It's embarrassing. Jason Lawrence's face flushed crimson. He shyly glanced around, relieved that no one had witnessed the kiss. Oh, a little man, are we? In my eyes, you're still just a child. Besides, my kisses are a sign of affection. Why be embarrassed? You're making me sad. Grace Flowers sighed dramatically, feigning distress. Justin, you're already criticizing me at such a young age. What will you do when you grow up? All right, don't be sad, mother. If you want to kiss me, go ahead. Jason Lawrence quickly offered his cheek, feigning willingness. Smooch, a resounding kiss landed on Jason Lawrence's small face. Grace Flowers, not holding back, planted another one, then rubbed his flushed cheeks, chuckling. Having this adorable child by her side made her life in this time period less monotonous. Mother, let's go home and practice swordplay. Jason Lawrence tugged at Grace Flowers' sleeve, eager to leave. He felt self-conscious under the gazes of passers-by, convinced they were laughing at him. All right, let's go home. Grace Flowers stood up, one hand holding Jason Lawrence's, the other carrying the sword boxes, as they strolled towards the intersection. Who could have foreseen her arrival in this time period? The mysterious man who gifted the Dark Legacy swords, could he also be from the modern era? Who was he? Only 2 people knew of her journey, the professor who brought her here and the enigmatic man who instructed her to seek the Phoenix Dragon Goblet. It couldn't be the professor. If he were here, he wouldn't be hiding. Could it be the mysterious man? Grace Flowers was filled with questions. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that her presence in this time period was no mere coincidence. She had to find the Phoenix Dragon Goblet quickly and return to her own time. She couldn't rely solely on Justin Lawrence's father to find it. She needed to actively search as well. The day was beautiful, the azure sky dotted with fluffy white clouds. The entire prince's mansion bustled with activity, preparing luxurious and exquisite gifts. Grace Flowers lay drowsily in bed, awakened by the commotion outside. As she opened her eyes, Justin Lawrence's ethereal face loomed before her. Startled, she instinctively recoiled, but a strong arm encircled her waist, preventing her from moving even an inch. "My little princess consort, am I that frightening? I consider myself the most handsome man in Great Gene. Surely, I wouldn't scare anyone." Seeing the evident fear in Grace Flowers' eyes, Justin Lawrence teased, his lips curving into a captivating smile, his star-like eyes twinkling with amusement. "Pfft, get away from me. Scaring people first thing in the morning. Don't you know that can be fatal?" Grace Flowers glared at him. While Justin Lawrence was the most handsome man she had ever encountered, he was also the most enigmatic and unpredictable. She couldn't afford to lower her guard. "How could I bear to frighten you? You are my lawfully wedded princess consort." Justin Lawrence chuckled, his words both arrogant and domineering. His dark hair cascaded down his cheek, accentuating his wild, devilishly handsome features. Grace Flowers stared at him, wondering if he had multiple personalities. In front of others, he was a frail, gentle, and reticent man. But in her presence, he was a wolf in sheep's clothing, domineering, wild, possessive, and utterly overwhelming every night. "Why aren't you out today?" Grace Flowers asked curiously. Lately, he had been leaving the prince's mansion early each morning, his whereabouts unknown, and returning only late at night. "Do you not know what day it is?" Justin Lawrence gently stroked the hair that fell across Grace Flowers' face. "What day is it?" Grace Flowers blinked, a puzzled expression on her face. Was today some grand holiday in this time and space? "My little princess consort, my little princess consort, why are you so silly?" Justin Lawrence looked at Grace Flowers' confused expression, shaking his head and sighing. "Today is the day you return to your maternal home for the first visit after marriage. This visit is very important for women, have you forgotten?" A visit? Back to her maternal home? Memories of this surfaced in Grace Flowers' mind. Great Gene had an important custom: on the 7th day after a woman's marriage, she must return to her maternal home for a visit. This visit was different from an ordinary one, it showed whether the woman was cherished after marrying into her husband's family. If the husband accompanied her back to her maternal home with generous gifts, the woman would gain face and respect within her family. Therefore, for this first visit back home, all women tried their best to persuade their husbands to accompany them and prepare lavish gifts. "So, you mean you want to go back to my maternal home with me?" Grace Flowers was surprised. He was actually willing to go with her. "Do you want to go alone?" Justin Lawrence saw only surprise on his little princess consort's pretty face, not a trace of joy, which was quite a blow to him. His little princess consort underestimated him. Can we not go back?" Grace Flowers couldn't help but groan. She really didn't want anything to do with the Flowers family. Although she was currently inhabiting the body of the Flowers family's eldest daughter, this eldest daughter held no status within the family and was completely disregarded. Going back would only be like pressing her warm face against a cold backside. What was the point? Moreover, she only wanted to find the Phoenix Dragon Goblet and didn't want to interact too much with people she wouldn't need to associate with in the future. "Little one, do you really consider yourself a married-off daughter like spilled water?" Justin Lawrence gently pinched Grace Flowers' small face, pressing her head against his chest, and whispered, "Don't worry, I'll go with you. Your stepmother and stepsister won't dare bully you." Grace Flowers' heart stirred. Justin Lawrence's voice held a hint of pampering. He must know that the eldest daughter of the Flowers family had been bullied and looked down upon since childhood. Did he think she didn't want to return to her maternal home because she was afraid of being bullied? Regardless of what he thought, his concern for her touched her. Wait a minute, Grace Flowers always felt that the marriage between a martial arts family and the royal family was strange. She hadn't had the chance to ask about it clearly, and this was a good opportunity to get some answers. Why did you marry me? Chapter 30, Time to Wake Up. Grace Flowers lifted her head, gazing directly at Justin Lawrence. In her past life, she and Justin Lawrence had no connection whatsoever, and she didn't believe the rumors that he wanted to marry her because he admired the eldest daughter of the Flowers. It was father's decree. He knew I didn't care for power, but he worried that after he passed, my brothers would ostracize me. So he sought out the Flowers, one of the 3 great families under the imperial court, for a marriage alliance, ensuring my peaceful life under the Flowers' protective shade. Justin Lawrence didn't hide anything, explaining clearly to Grace Flowers. Is it truly that simple? With your abilities, you don't need the Flowers' influence. You marrying into the Flowers must have another purpose. Grace Flowers analyzed calmly, completely disbelieving that a marriage between the martial arts world and the royal family could be so simple. Perhaps the Emperor and the Flowers both hoped to bolster their power, but what about Justin Lawrence? He wasn't someone who would compromise just because the Emperor said it was, for his own good, so why did he agree? What was his motive? Little lass, why bother knowing so much? It's time to get up, your father-in-law is probably waiting. Justin Lawrence didn't deny Grace Flowers' speculation, but instead of answering directly, he changed the subject. There really was another purpose, Grace Flowers realized, but she didn't press further. After all, Justin Lawrence was an upright gentleman. Though he didn't reveal his purpose, he didn't hide from her that he had one. Although Justin Lawrence always acted mysteriously, she somewhat admired him. Well, if he didn't exhaust her every night, she would admire him even more. Grace Flowers got up, dressed, and walked out of the room with Justin Lawrence. Seeing the impressive pile of chests in the courtyard, she couldn't help but gasp. What was the purpose of so many chests? Your Highness, the gifts are ready. The steward, seeing Justin Lawrence and Grace Flowers, rushed over to report. What's inside? Grace Flowers asked curiously. Your Highness, these are gifts prepared for your visit back to your family home. The steward replied respectfully. The prince had instructed him to prepare generous gifts and was personally accompanying the princess on her visit, showing his satisfaction with her. Seeing the prince's improved complexion after the marriage, the steward was overjoyed. This was all thanks to the princess, and his respect for Grace Flowers deepened. Ahem, just a small preparation, I wonder if your Highness is satisfied? Justin Lawrence put on a frail appearance, his face pale, his whole being radiating a harmless aura. If I say I'm not satisfied, what will you do? Seeing Justin Lawrence's two-faced act, Grace Flowers couldn't resist provoking him. I beg your Highness's forgiveness, it's my incompetence. His Highness specifically instructed that the gifts must be grand, so as not to disgrace your Highness. If your Highness is dissatisfied with my preparations, I will immediately prepare more. Hearing this, the steward's face paled, and he knelt to explain. Ahem. It's my oversight. I should have let your Highness prepare the gifts yourself. Please don't blame the steward, ahem. Justin Lawrence anxiously explained, his cough worsening with his feigned anxiety. Your Highness, it's my fault. You don't need to apologize for me. The steward looked worriedly at Justin Lawrence and quickly said. All right, I'm very satisfied with the gifts the steward prepared. Grace Flowers rolled her eyes. Justin Lawrence was indeed cunning. His coughing made her seem petty. She approached Justin Lawrence, reaching behind his back, a gentle smile on her beautiful face, while her hand behind his back struck him hard. The dull thud was audible to everyone, it was clearly a forceful blow. A calculating glint flashed in Grace Flowers' eyes, her voice gentle as she asked, Your Highness, are you feeling a little better? Cough, cough. Caught off guard by Grace Flowers' sudden, powerful strike, Justin Lawrence choked and coughed for real this time. Was this little lass trying to murder her husband? But he could only pretend nothing happened, his pale face flushed from the intense coughing. I'm fine now, your Highness is so kind. Justin Lawrence quietly turned, grasping Grace Flowers's small hand. The little lass's strength wasn't insignificant, even carrying a hint of internal force. If not for his superior martial arts, he might be sprawled on the ground right now. Little lass, I'll remember this. Tonight, I'll collect my due. Justin Lawrence leaned close, whispering in Grace Flowers's ear, his tone laced with ambiguous meaning. Get lost. Grace Flowers retorted fiercely, her voice just as low. She was about to push Justin Lawrence away when she saw the steward and servants looking at him with concern, and she immediately abandoned the idea. With his cunning, he would surely fall to the ground if she pushed him, and the servants would see her as a heinous criminal. In their eyes, they're frail. Prince was coughing so hard he collapsed against the princess, who supported him to prevent his fall. How heartwarming and harmonious the scene appeared to them. Your Highness, let's get in the carriage, cough, cough. Justin Lawrence hid the smile in his eyes, patting his chest as if catching his breath, actually suppressing his laughter. Grace Flowers hopped into the carriage, while Justin Lawrence was helped in, feigning weakness. Once inside, the curtains drawn, the carriage became a private space. Justin Lawrence immediately discarded his frail act, grabbing Grace Flowers and pulling her into his arms. Grace Flowers was caught off guard, enveloped in a familiar, warm embrace. Inside the carriage, an ambiguous atmosphere spread. A long while later, when Grace Flowers felt almost suffocated by the kiss, Justin Lawrence released her. He took a deep breath, suppressing his rising desire, his eyes flashing with unconcealed fire. He teased, that's the interest up front, I'll collect the principal tonight. You bastard, you think you can collect whenever you want? We'll see about that. Grace Flowers pushed Justin Lawrence's hand away. She had been diligently practicing martial arts these past few days, and it was a good opportunity to spar with him and see if it was effective. Why do I find you so unreserved with me? Justin Lawrence sighed, shaking his head. He knew his little princess was dissatisfied with his two-faced act, but she was actually similar to him. In front of him, she didn't hide her straightforward nature, but in front of others, she was aloof, strong, distant, and polite. However, he was pleased that his little princess could be herself with him, showing that she didn't consider him an outsider. Do you deserve my reservation? Grace Flowers snorted coldly. As the carriage swayed gently, she felt sleepy. She couldn't help but yawn, having been tormented by the energetic Justin Lawrence until midnight last night. Now, in this gentle rhythm, she was truly drowsy. Sleep for a while, it'll take some time to reach the Flowers estate. Seeing Grace Flowers' tired appearance, Justin Lawrence said with a smile. Last night, he'd intentionally let the little lass sleep early, yet she still seemed tired. It appeared her constitution was weak, needing proper nourishment, lest she truly couldn't withstand his nightly demands. Grace Flowers nodded, folded her arms, leaned against the carriage, and closed her eyes to rest. Drifting off, she felt herself embraced by a familiar, warm chest. Grace Flowers vigilantly opened her eyes to Justin Lawrence's magnified face before her. Startled once already this morning, she was now immune to his handsome features looming so close. Lean on me for a proper sleep, the road ahead is a bit rough, Justin Lawrence said gently, his eyes filled with tenderness. Not bothering to refuse, Grace Flowers shifted, finding the most comfortable position against him, and continued to sleep. Sleeping against the stiff carriage couldn't compare to a human cushion, naturally, she wouldn't mistreat herself. Despite being in the carriage, she slept soundly. After an unknown time, she vaguely sensed the carriage stop swaying. Had they arrived at the Flowers estate? Yet, she didn't hear Justin Lawrence wake her. Sensing something amiss, Grace Flowers opened her eyes to see Justin Lawrence gazing down at her intently. She raised an eyebrow, asking, "Have we arrived?" "Almost," Justin Lawrence said with a smile. "Then why aren't we moving?" Grace Flowers sat up, stretching, and asked suspiciously. A good sleep was truly refreshing, she could already foresee dealing with the provocations of her stepmother and stepsister upon entering the estate. "Seeing you sleep so soundly, I couldn't bear to wake you, so I had the guard stop here to let you rest before continuing," Justin Lawrence explained. The little lass sleeping so unguardedly in his arms gave him an unprecedented sense of contentment. He even had the crazy thought of her sleeping there until the end of time. The moment she left his embrace, he felt a sense of emptiness. "I'm awake now, let's go," Grace Flowers said, expressing satisfaction with his consideration. The carriage started moving again, only to stop less than a quarter of an hour later. "Your Highness, we've arrived," the guard outside announced. "Yes," Justin Lawrence replied softly. Justin Lawrence rarely showed his face in public, yet today he accompanied her to the Flowers, making an appearance. This was truly unbelievable. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "This time, you're coming home with me, breaking your decade-long anonymity. Confess, did you have an ulterior motive all along? What if I said I came home with you for you? Would you believe me?" Hashtag Chapter 31, Don't You Know You're Heavy? For me. Grace Flowers raised an eyebrow in doubt. She didn't think she had the charm to disrupt Justin Lawrence's decade-long plan of remaining hidden. "Because I don't want you to be bullied by the Flowers." Justin Lawrence affectionately stroked Grace Flowers' jet-black hair. From the first glance, he knew his little princess consort was strong and would absolutely not allow herself to be bullied. "Do I look like I can be bullied?" Grace Flowers rolled her eyes. She was someone who always retaliated. Being bullied was impossible. If someone gave her a punch, she would kick back twice as hard. At this moment, a powerful voice came from outside the carriage. "Is the prince inside?" "Yes, please wait a moment. Our prince has been jostled by the rough roads and is feeling slightly unwell, currently resting in the carriage," the guard calmly replied. Hearing the guard's words, Grace Flowers instantly felt the urge to vomit 3 liters of blood. She shifted her gaze to Justin Lawrence, and he, very timely, coughed a few times, pretending to be exactly as the guard described, slightly unwell and resting. "It seems father-in-law has been waiting for quite some time," Justin Lawrence whispered in Grace Flowers' ear. "So, aren't you getting down?" Grace Flowers rolled her eyes. "What's the harm in letting your stepmother and stepsister wait a little longer?" Justin Lawrence chuckled. "You're doing this on purpose." Grace Flowers looked at the man in front of her clearly playing tricks and couldn't help but laugh. This man, was he looking for an opportunity to annoy the stepmother and stepsister who had bullied her? Although she felt this method was a bit childish, she couldn't deny that Justin Lawrence's protective intentions towards her made her very happy. Justin Lawrence smiled but didn't answer. Instead, he took a veiled hat from a chest in the carriage and put it on. "All right, let's go down." Seeing this hat, Grace Flowers froze, suddenly remembering the descriptions of the mysterious benefactor who gifted the divine sword from the Chien family weapons shop owner. That person also wore a veiled hat, and now Justin Lawrence appeared in the same attire. Could it be that the mysterious benefactor was Justin Lawrence? Impossible. If it were Justin Lawrence, he wouldn't need to be so mysterious. He could have just given it to her directly. Why bother having the shopkeeper present it? There was no reason for him to do that. Grace Flowers shook her head vigorously, dismissing the speculation that the mysterious benefactor was Justin Lawrence. While she was lost in thought, Justin Lawrence had already lifted the carriage curtain and, supported by the guard, weakly stepped down. Grace Flowers jumped down from the carriage, and Justin Lawrence immediately shifted his weight from the guard to her. "Don't you know you're heavy?" Grace Flowers felt the sudden increase in pressure. Justin Lawrence was starting to pretend again. She suppressed the urge to roll her eyes and whispered to him. Justin Lawrence straightened up slightly, knowing that Grace Flowers' small frame could hardly bear his weight, but he still leaned close to her. Henry Flowers, leading a group of the Flowers family members, had been waiting at the door for a long time. Yesterday, he received a letter from the prince saying he would come with Grace to visit today, but didn't specify the time. So, he had everyone up early for breakfast and then out to greet them. Although the third prince was now his son-in-law, considering their status, he was just a commoner, while the prince was of noble birth. It wouldn't do to be late, respectfully greeting him at the door was proper etiquette. Who would have guessed, after waiting and waiting, for nearly an hour and a half, the prince's carriage finally appeared. "Henry Flowers and family, greetings to your highness." Seeing Justin Lawrence alight from the carriage, Henry Flowers hastily knelt to greet him. Seeing Henry Flowers kneel, the concubines and servants behind him followed suit, all except Fiona Flowers, who hesitated arrogantly, refusing to kneel. Henry Flowers glared at Fiona Flowers with displeasure, a stern expression briefly crossing his face. "Grace, don't be disrespectful, kneel down." Second concubine Bella White, seeing Henry Flowers' displeasure, quickly tugged at Fiona Flowers. Fiona Flowers fiercely glared at Grace Flowers, who stood beside Justin Lawrence. Why should she kneel before this woman, unloved by her father since childhood? But seeing Henry Flowers' expression darken, Fiona Flowers reluctantly knelt, rubbing her still aching right wrist. A look of hatred flashed across her beautiful face. Her wrist, broken by Grace Flowers, hadn't yet healed. Thinking of the pain she'd endured these past days, she wished she could tie Grace Flowers up and torment her. Justin Lawrence didn't immediately bid Henry Flowers and the others to rise, but instead gently took Grace Flowers' small hand in his. Grace Flowers smiled, understanding Justin Lawrence's intent. He was giving her the opportunity to assert her dominance over these people. Looking at the crowd prostrated before her, these people who, since her childhood, had never given her, no, the original Grace Flowers, any respect, Grace Flowers' eyes scanned the crowd. Each time her gaze landed on a strange yet familiar face, memories of the original Grace Flowers' experiences with that person surfaced in her mind. The Flowers were a large clan, naturally with many members. And with many people, the relationships between the wife and concubines became complex, rife with schemes and cunning. As the firstborn daughter, lacking a mother's love and disregarded by the head of the family, Henry Flowers, almost to the point of disdain, Grace Flowers wasn't respected by the concubines or her younger siblings. They saw her as an obstacle, her status as the legitimate firstborn daughter suppressing their own daughter's positions. Still not hearing Justin Lawrence's permission to rise, Henry Flowers didn't dare stand. And since Henry Flowers remained kneeling, no one else dared to rise either. Waiting under the scorching sun for an hour or two had already caused these pampered women to complain incessantly, and now being forced to kneel further fueled their discontent. The others, fearing Justin Lawrence's status, didn't dare raise their heads. Only Fiona Flowers looked up at Justin Lawrence, wondering why the third prince hadn't yet allowed them to rise. She then saw Grace Flowers looking at her with a faint, enigmatic smile, sending a chill up her spine. After Justin Lawrence and Grace Flowers alighted, the guards stood behind them, holding umbrellas to shield them from the sun, so they didn't feel the heat. It was the hottest part of the day. The Flowers family, kneeling under the blazing sun for about 15 minutes, began to wilt. Pampered concubines surreptitiously dabbed their sweat with handkerchiefs. The ground, scorching hot from the sun's rays, offered no relief. Clad in their thin summer clothes, with no protection against the burning earth, they suffered. "Rise," Grace Flowers finally spoke. Hearing his daughter grant permission to rise, but not the third prince, Henry Flowers hesitated, glancing uncertainly at Justin Lawrence. "The princess consort has given you permission to rise, so rise then." Cough, cough, Justin Lawrence spoke in a calm tone. Hearing this, a look of surprise flickered across Henry Flowers' face. "Thank you, Your Highness, thank you, Your Highness." Fiona Flowers stood up, a wave of dizziness washing over her. Her body, pampered since childhood, couldn't bear this torment. Seeing Grace Flowers sitting comfortably under the parasol while they had to kneel under the scorching sun, Fiona's anger flared. Without regard for propriety, she confronted Grace Flowers. "Did you deliberately make us kneel for so long? Sister, you jest. How could I bear to let you kneel under the scorching sun?" It's simply royal protocol. I am but a humble concubine, how dare I alter it? Grace Flowers smiled coldly. Seeing several concubines tremble, she recognized those who had once forced the original Grace Flowers to kneel under the sun. There were many days to come, she would reclaim every bit of what they owed the original Grace. Hearing Grace Flowers' words, Henry Flowers' face became a mask of awkward discomfort. You. Fiona Flowers wanted to say something more, but Bella White covered her mouth. Silence. There's no place for you to speak here. Step back. Already feeling humiliated, Henry Flowers' face darkened as he scolded Fiona Flowers for adding to the embarrassment, especially since she was his favored daughter. Never having been scolded by her father in public before, Fiona Flowers was stunned, her face alternating between pale and flushed. Seeing the schadenfreude on the faces of some of the concubines, she felt utterly humiliated. All of this was because of Grace Flowers, that vile woman. Fiona Flowers glared at Grace Flowers, but when her gaze met Grace's seemingly calm and gentle eyes, which held a sharp, sword-like glint, she shuddered. She suddenly felt that Grace Flowers, this formerly weak and useless waste, was frightening. Your Highness, please. Henry Flowers respectfully clasped his hands towards Justin Lawrence. The rumble of carriages echoed from afar, attracting everyone's attention. A procession of more than 10 carriages appeared, forming an impressive train. The looks of curiosity on everyone's faces, upon seeing the HGN character embroidered on the carriage flags, instantly turned to astonishment. These are a few small gifts that I had the steward prepare. Though not much, they represent my regard for the princess consort. Justin Lawrence glanced at the carriage procession and spoke casually. The concubines couldn't help but look at Grace Flowers with envious eyes. They hadn't expected that the eldest miss of the Flowers family, whom they had never taken seriously, would have her fortune reversed after marriage. It truly made them envious. When they heard that Grace Flowers had to marry the chronically ill third prince, as the rumors went, they had been so relieved and gloated. It was precisely because the legitimate daughter, Grace Flowers, had married that any good marriage proposals could now fall to their own daughters. Now, they wished it had been their daughters who married the third prince. Looking at the third prince, who had never appeared in public according to rumors, although they couldn't see his face at present, his tall stature, the noble aura radiating from him despite his seemingly frail health, and his imposing, naturally commanding presence made them feel that even if he was ill, he was still a figure of high esteem. Your Highness is too kind, Henry Flowers said politely. His daughter being valued by the prince brought him, as her father, great pride. Grace, you must be tired from the long journey. Come inside and rest. Grace Flowers gave Henry Flowers a half-smile, offering no reply. His previous indifference towards her original self, contrasted with this sudden display of paternal affection, struck her as deeply ironic. Even in the remnants of the original host's memories, Henry Flowers remained a distant figure, likely due to their infrequent interactions throughout her life. Observing this nominal father, his square face etched with authority, his seventh-level martial arts cultivation radiating an aura of refinement, Grace Flowers found Henry Flowers' ambition increasingly evident. Upon reaching the main hall, Henry Flowers dismissed all his concubines and daughters, retaining only Bella White and Fiona Flowers. Henry Flowers' shift in attitude towards Grace Flowers, from cold indifference to present tenderness, grated on Fiona Flowers. Previously, her father's affection had been solely for her and her brother. Witnessing his kindness towards Grace Flowers now evoked a sense of their paternal bond being fractured. Grace, have you settled in at the prince's mansion? Henry Flowers inquired solicitously. This was the first time he had directly regarded Grace Flowers. His daughter's appearance strongly resembled her mother's. The thought of his wife brought a flicker of pain to Henry Flowers' eyes. With no worries about food, clothing, or backstabbing, naturally, I've settled in quite well. Grace Flowers glanced at Bella White and her daughter, her reply laced with a deeper meaning. Henry Flowers was momentarily speechless by Grace Flowers's unveiled remark. Glancing at Bella White and her daughter, he acknowledged that his indulgence had spoiled them, likely causing Grace considerable hardship. To think my princess suffered such hardships, even under Lord Flowers' protection. Such injustice grieves me deeply. Justin Lawrence took Grace Flowers's hand, offering outward comfort, while his tone subtly reproached Henry Flowers for his inadequate protection of his daughter. #### Chapter 32, Utterly Preposterous, It's My Fault, Grace. I haven't taken good care of you before, but I'll make it up to you double in the future. Henry Flowers said with a remorseful expression, looking back at the past 18 years he had neglected Grace. His resentment towards her had long since dissipated, and he knew Grace was innocent. Her mother's death had nothing to do with her. With His Highness taking care of you, you're living well. Father, you should pay more attention to Fiona. She's already 16, yet she's still unruly all day long. It's embarrassing for the Flowers family. If people find out, they'll think all the Flowers daughters are like that. Grace Flowers never believed in promises of compensation, instead directing her sharp words towards Fiona Flowers. You're right. I'll discipline Fiona properly from now on. Perhaps feeling too guilty towards Grace Flowers, Henry Flowers agreed with everything she said. He then scolded Bella White, Fiona's arrogance and unruly behavior are all due to your spoiling her. Discipline her properly from now on. Yes, master. Being scolded in front of her children and relatives, Bella White felt ashamed, lowering her head to hide her resentment. Her face, along with Fiona Flowers, turned pale. Grace Flowers sipped her tea, taking a small bit of interest first. There was still plenty of time, there was no rush. Suddenly, hurried footsteps sounded from outside the door. As the footsteps drew closer, the figure of a young man appeared at the doorway. The young man bore a striking resemblance to Fiona Flowers, a handsome youth. He glanced around the hall, his eyes lighting up when he saw Grace Flowers. He cheerfully called out, "Elder sister." Upon seeing this handsome youth, memories of him surfaced in Grace Flowers' mind, a warm smile gracing her face as she nodded to him. This handsome youth was Hua Zhizhi, Fiona Flowers' twin brother. He had a gentle nature and had always disliked Fiona Flowers bullying Grace Flowers, thus he was closer to Grace Flowers. Because of Hua Zhizhi, Grace Flowers' days were a little easier. The remaining warm memories made Grace Flowers feel even more favorably towards this young man. In the Flowers family, the only person who made the original owner feel a bit of human warmth was probably Hua Zhizhi, who helped her during difficult times. When she was locked in the storage room, starving, he secretly brought her buns and water. When she was punished to wash clothes in the freezing winter, he helped her wash them. When she was injured, he brought her precious medicine. It could be said that this young man played a significant role in the original owner's survival. "Jir, shouldn't you be at school today? Why are you back at this hour?" Henry Flowers frowned upon seeing Hua Zhizhi. He had many daughters, but Hua Zhizhi was his only son, so he placed all his hopes on him and was very strict with him. He took his skipping school and running home very seriously. "I heard that elder sister came home to visit father and mother, so I asked the teacher for permission to leave early. I wanted to see elder sister, afraid that if I came home tonight, elder sister would have already left." Hua Zhizhi hurriedly explained. Hearing that Hua Zhizhi came back to see Grace Flowers, Henry Flowers couldn't bring himself to scold him, just nodded and let him sit next to Grace Flowers. "Humph, flatterer. Seeing that my sister has become a princess, you immediately come back to flatter and curry favor, right?" As soon as Hua Zhizhi sat down, Fiona Flowers snorted coldly. She always resented Hua Zhizhi's concern for Grace Flowers. If it weren't for Hua Zhizhi's secret help, Grace Flowers would have been harmed long ago, and wouldn't be here today, looking at her smugly. Although Fiona Flowers spoke softly, Hua Zhizhi still heard clearly. He frowned at his arrogant and overbearing twin sister. This sister was truly becoming more and more shrewish, all because of their mother's spoiling. Don't worry, I won't return to the prince's mansion today. I'll stay here for a few days. Grace Flowers, with her sharp ears, also heard Fiona Flowers' words. She hadn't originally planned to stay, but now she thought it would be good to stay for a few days and collect some interest on behalf of the original owner. That's great. It would be wonderful if His Highness and Grace stayed for a few more days. Henry Flowers beamed, nodding repeatedly. Wait a minute. Grace Flowers placed her teacup on the table, looked at Justin Lawrence, and slowly said, I'm not sure if His Highness will stay at the Flowers residence for a few days. She hadn't told Justin Lawrence that she would be staying at the Flowers residence for a few days, and she saw Justin Lawrence busy coming and going every day, so he probably didn't have time to stay here with her. She didn't force Justin Lawrence to stay, just threw the question to him, letting him decide for himself. If the princess stays here, naturally I must stay too. Justin Lawrence replied without hesitation. Justin Lawrence's words earned Grace Flowers quite a few envious glances, especially from Bella White and her daughter, envious of her being doted on. I'll immediately have someone clean up Luhua Garden. His Highness and Grace can stay there. Seeing Grace Flowers so favored that the prince didn't even want to leave her side for a moment, Henry Flowers felt truly proud, his face beaming with joy as he immediately sent someone to prepare. Upon hearing Luhua Garden, everyone except Justin Lawrence and his guards looked at Henry Flowers in astonishment. Luhua Garden was a forbidden area of the Flowers residence, previously the residence of Grace Flowers' mother. Since Grace Flowers' mother died giving birth to her, Luhua Garden, which symbolized the status of the Flowers family's mistress, had been sealed. Even Bella White, favored by Henry Flowers, hadn't had the privilege of staying there. Now, letting Grace Flowers stay in Luhua Garden made Bella White and her daughter grind their teeth. Once Grace Flowers stayed there, even for just a few days, it would mean that whenever Grace Flowers returned home, she would stay in Luhua Garden. In other words, they could forget about ever staying in Luhua Garden. Grace Flowers intended to refuse, but thinking of the original owner, she decided to go and see the place where her mother had lived on her behalf. So, she didn't refuse, letting Henry Flowers make the arrangements. Master, lunch is ready. A servant came up to report. Henry Flowers nodded, stood up, and respectfully said to Justin Lawrence, Your Highness, please come to the dining room for the meal. Justin Lawrence nodded slightly and extended his hand towards Grace Flowers. Grace Flowers graciously helped him up, and they walked together to the dining room, followed by Henry Flowers and the others. Aren't you busy? Why are you staying here with me? Grace Flowers softly asked Justin Lawrence. She hadn't expected him to stay, she thought he would only make a brief appearance. I'm worried that you'll be harmed instead of succeeding in your revenge, so it's better to stay and watch over you. If anything happens to you, where will I find a princess as pleasing to me as you? Justin Lawrence said half-jokingly, his eyes twinkling with amusement under his hat. I scoff. If you want to watch the drama unfold, just say it. Why make up such a grand excuse? Your Highness, could you be any more shameless? Grace Flowers pouted. Did he really think she was a child easy to deceive? My princess truly understands my heart. Justin Lawrence chuckled, his body shaking slightly with laughter, which Grace Flowers, supporting him, could feel. Grace Flowers was completely speechless at Justin Lawrence's shamelessness. Arriving at the dining room, seeing the lavishly prepared table, such good treatment, Grace Flowers couldn't help but sneer. The original owner had never been allowed to eat at the dining table before, always eating meager meals in that remote little courtyard. Now, because she was married to Justin Lawrence, with the status of the third princess, she was treated with more respect. After finishing lunch, Grace Flowers excused herself and Justin Lawrence, saying he needed a midday rest, to leave the dining table filled with scrutinizing gazes. Grace, I'll have the steward select a few first-class maidservants to serve you and His Highness in Lu Hua Garden later. Henry Flowers stood up, looking at Grace Flowers supporting Justin Lawrence. No need. Father, just have the steward arrange for the servants who previously attended me to come to Grace Flowers' court. The others aren't necessary. Grace Flowers paused, speaking calmly. The servants who had willingly stayed by her side were those her mother had once cared for. Thus, even though Grace Flowers held no particular status within the Flowers family, her clothing and expenses even less than a servant's, they still chose to look after her, rather than seeking employment with the favored concubines. All right. You attend to the prince's rest. I'll have the steward make the arrangements. Henry Flowers readily agreed, watching as Grace Flowers supported Justin Lawrence as they departed. Once Justin Lawrence left, his guards followed, leaving only Bella White, her 2 children, and Henry Flowers in the dining hall. Fiona, treat your elder sister well from now on. Also, while Grace is home these next few days, visit Grace Flowers' court more often. But mind your manners there, don't give the prince cause for ridicule. Henry Flowers waited until Grace Flowers was some distance away before sitting down and addressing Fiona Flowers. Father, I won't go. Fiona Flowers pouted, immediately refusing. Why should she try to win Grace Flowers' favor? This is for your own good. If you please Grace, perhaps she can find you a good marriage prospect. Grace is so favored now, she interacts with royalty and nobility. Henry Flowers patiently explained to Fiona Flowers. Perhaps Fiona could even marry a prince. Then the Flowers family would have 2 daughters married into the royal family, and he could finally hold his head high, no longer seen as a crude man who only knew martial arts. That's right, Fiona. Your father is correct. You should visit Grace Flowers' court more often these next few days. Bella White, grasping Henry Flowers' intentions, immediately agreed. If Fiona also married into the royal family, she too could hold her head high. I said I won't go, and I won't. Father, Mother, stop talking. Humph. Fiona Flowers abruptly stood, shouting angrily. Then, pushing her chair back, she ran out. Fiona. This child. Bella White started to follow but, seeing Henry Flowers' displeasure, stayed put. Look at how you've raised your daughter. Good for nothing, hot-tempered. It's infuriating. Henry Flowers frowned. He used to find Fiona's lively and adorable nature endearing. Why was she so arrogant now? Fiona is still young. I'll talk to her later. Don't be angry, my lord. Bella White hastily soothed him. She's 16, of marriageable age. What do you mean, still young? Preposterous. Henry Flowers stood and left the dining hall. Bella White frowned, then, noticing Hoa Chi Tri still sitting quietly, her eyes lit up. Tri Nhai, she said quickly, you and your elder sister have always been close. Talk to her, ask her to find a good marriage prospect for your younger sister. Mother, Fiona isn't even worried about her own marriage. Why should I, her older brother, interfere? Hoa Chi Tri shook his head, unwilling to get involved. Fiona and their mother had bullied their elder sister relentlessly in the past. Had they not considered that fortunes could change, that one day their elder sister would be above them, forcing them to beg for her favor? She's your own sister. Why won't you help her? You always sided with that Grace Flowers before. If I could choose, I'd rather have elder sister as my true sister. Hoa Chi Tri, simple and honest, had long disliked how his mother and sister, fueled by favoritism and arrogance, constantly sought opportunities to bully their kind elder sister. With that, he stood and also left the dining hall. In the dining hall, besides the remaining servants, only Bella White was left. Seething with anger, she cursed her fate. Neither of her children brought her peace of mind. She yearned for her daughter to marry well, hoping her own status as a second wife for 20 years might finally change. She was determined to see her daughter marry better than Grace Flowers. Bella White gritted her teeth, a resolute glint in her eyes. Chapter 33, Little Disciple, You've Suffered. Grace Flowers surveyed the Lu Hua garden, sealed off for 18 years. Not large, but exquisitely detailed, clearly Henry Flowers had maintained it meticulously. Despite its abandonment, it flourished, vibrant and clean, devoid of any desolation. Your wish fulfilled, consider it repayment for lending me this body, Grace Flowers murmured, arms crossed, gazing at a crepe myrtle tree in the distance. The original owner's deepest desire was to visit Lu Hua Garden, her unseen mother's former residence. Here, she might find remnants of her mother, keepsakes to cherish. Ignored by Henry Flowers, access was impossible, a dream denied for 18 years. Not only her, but even the favored Bella White and her daughter were barred from entry. Soft footsteps approached from behind. Currently, only she and Justin Lawrence, along with his personal guards, occupied the garden. Without turning, she knew it was him. Indeed, a strong, slender arm embraced her waist, pulling her into a familiar, warm embrace. Little disciple, what holds your attention so raptly? Justin Lawrence followed her gaze to the lush crepe myrtle, its thick trunk suggesting decades of growth. Mother planted this, didn't she? Grace Flowers asked softly, leaning against his chest. Likely, Justin Lawrence nodded. A wave of mournful longing washed over Grace Flowers, a resonance from the original body. No longer surprised, she recalled a similar, profound stirring upon meeting Philip Bennett. Shouldn't you be attending to matters? You returned quickly, Grace Flowers dismissed the unfamiliar grief. Inhabiting this body, she refused to be ruled by its emotions, shifting the subject. Justin Lawrence likely hadn't anticipated staying for several days, necessitating the reorganization of his usual duties. Just a few instructions, Justin Lawrence, still wearing his conical hat, gazed at her with tender concern. Little disciple, you've suffered much. Past is past. From now on, only I can inflict suffering, no one touches me, Grace Flowers laughed confidently. My princess is truly audacious, uttering such words, Justin Lawrence adored her arrogance, the aura of power radiating from her, as if the world lay at her feet. Naturally, after drowning, I've been reborn, transformed, Grace Flowers smirked. Regardless of time or dynasty, women must be strong, or be trampled upon. Miss, Susie Green's joyful voice called from behind. Grace Flowers turned as Nanny Wong and Susie Green hurried towards them. Nanny Wong, who raised her, was closer than a mother. Susie Green, a young maid brought from Nanny Wong's village as a companion, had served her for 5 or 6 years. Her other attendants were older. Despite having many sisters, the original owner, neglected, played alone. Nanny Wong, fearing her loneliness, brought Susie Green for companionship. To the original owner, these servants were family. Despite the hardships, she had loyal, caring servants, a small comfort. Miss, I've missed you so much, Susie Green exclaimed, reaching her side. It's Princess now, Nanny Wong corrected, pulling Susie Green back and bowing to Justin Lawrence. Greetings, Your Highness. Whatever you're comfortable with, Nanny Wong. How have you been? Grace Flowers helped Nanny Wong up, smiling. After Princess, married, second madam said we couldn't idle here, so we were assigned to serve the concubines and other young ladies, Susie Green blurted out. No one mistreated you? From lingering memories, Bella White was a cunning woman, not easily dealt with. Grace Flowers feared she'd seize the opportunity to torment her loyal servants. I'm young, I can endure, but Nanny Wong and Uncle Lee are old. It would be wonderful if they could return home to retire, Susie Green continued, ignoring Nanny Wong's warning glance. After you left, second miss, on behalf of second madam, reassigned our duties. I wonder if you offended her, and she's taking it out on us, giving us the hardest tasks. Child, why burden the princess with this? She's married now. Leave the flowers family matters to us. We're old, we can bear it. Don't worry, princess, Nanny Wang chided gently, smiling at Grace Flowers. Susie Green is right. Nanny Wang, Uncle Lee, you've cared for me for 18 years. It's time I repaid you. Grace Flowers, noticing Nanny Wang's graying hair, formed a plan. Susie Green, fetch Uncle Lee and the others. I have questions. Yes, Miss. Susie Green, seeing her mistress's newfound decisiveness, was overjoyed. This wasn't the weak, helpless miss of before, but a noble princess, outranking even the master of the Flowers family. My princess seems occupied. Attend to your matters. I'll check on the study. Justin Lawrence affectionately stroked her hair, indulging her. If anything major arose, he would handle it. Her happiness was paramount. Go ahead, Grace Flowers nodded, pleased with his measured attentiveness. Except for his nightly excesses, he was hardly objectionable. Soon, Susie Green gathered the old servants. Seeing the girl they'd watched grow, they rejoiced, inquiring about her well-being. Please, sit and talk. Grace Flowers gestured to the stone table, urging them to sit. Nanny Wang, Uncle Lee, and the others initially refused, but relented under her insistence, settling around the table. Nanny Wang, Uncle Lee, Uncle Wang, and Uncle Lu, you've all signed lifelong servitude contracts with the Flowers family? Grace Flowers glanced at each, recalling their names from memory. Indeed, when we entered service, we signed lifelong contracts, Nanny Wang confirmed. A melancholic air settled over them, resigned to dying in service, separated from their families. You all have families back home? Grace Flowers inquired. Her memories held only their care within the Flowers household, nothing of their personal lives. Our grandchildren are about your age, Miss. Uncle Lee chuckled. The Flowers family granted them 1 day a month to visit their families. Recalling his granddaughter, soon to be married, Uncle Lee beamed. Indeed, my Chang Gui marries next month, Uncle Lu added, sharing the joyous news. Oh, congratulations, congratulations. Why haven't you mentioned this before? The old servants, upon hearing this joyous news, were all overjoyed, as if their own grandchildren were about to get married. I only confirmed the wedding date when I returned home the day before yesterday. These past few days, we've all been busy in different courtyards, and haven't had a chance to tell you, Uncle Lu explained. Grace Flowers smiled, seeing the radiant, happy smiles of the old folks as they spoke of their families, and felt even more certain that her actions today were wise. These elders had all reached the age of retirement. Allowing them a peaceful old age would be a way for the original owner to repay their kindness and care. All right, if you start talking about family, you'll never stop. Hurry and listen to what Miss has to ask us, Wang Mama chuckled, interrupting their lively conversation, not forgetting that Grace Flowers had something to ask. It's nothing major, just wanting to know everyone's general situation. If everyone here has family outside, I'll find a way for you all to return home, no need to stay at the Flowers residence, Grace Flowers replied. Is Miss speaking the truth? The old servants, hearing they could return home and not die of old age at the Flowers residence, their eyes lit up. But then, remembering they had signed lifelong contracts with the Flowers family, and knowing how difficult it would be to break those contracts, their eyes dimmed again. Don't worry, leave this matter to me. For the next few days, everyone just stay in Lu Hua Garden. When I leave here, it will also be the time for everyone to leave the Flowers residence and return to your hometowns to enjoy your old age, Grace Flowers assured them. About this, Miss, there's no need. We're fine staying here. Miss is already married, don't let Second Madam make things difficult for you because of us. The old folks, thinking that the young miss they regarded as their own granddaughter might face difficulties from Second Madam because of them, hurriedly advised against it. Second Madam won't make things difficult for me. Everyone, go back to work. Grace Flowers had devised a plan. After dismissing the old servants, she said to Susie Green, "Susie Green, come with me to find second madam." "Miss, do we really want to go find second madam?" Susie Green asked with some worry. Remembering how badly Miss had been bullied before, wouldn't going to find second madam now be asking for trouble? "Yes, let's go." Grace Flowers nodded, stood up, stretched, and with Bella White in mind, began her negotiations. Seeing Miss so confident and calm, Susie Green felt reassured. She followed Grace Flowers out of Lu Hua Garden, towards Fu Rong Garden where Bella White resided. #### Chapter 34, You're nothing but idle. Bella White reclined against the long couch, feigning relaxation, but her mind churned. Just now, witnessing the third prince prepare so many lavish gifts for Grace Flowers, each one a rare treasure, stirred envy among the women of the Flowers clan. The concubines subtly hinted that Fiona Flowers, now 16, still lacked a good marriage proposal, and if she remained unwed for 2 more years, her value would diminish. A young woman's prime marriageable years were these 2, so they should start concerning themselves with their daughter's marriage prospects. They had assumed the third prince, perpetually ill, wouldn't live long, but today he seemed, despite a slight cough and frailty, not so near death. Seeing his affection and generosity towards Grace Flowers, Bella White felt a pang of regret for not marrying Fiona Flowers to him. If Fiona had married him, she would be enjoying such fortune now. The Flowers, though one of the 3 great noble families of the martial arts world, found it challenging to forge ties with the imperial court. When the emperor offered to betroth the third prince to a Flowers' daughter, they coveted the royal connection but, hearing rumors of the prince's constant illness, feared widowhood. So, Bella White had schemed to have Grace Flowers marry him instead. Now, it seemed she had thrown away a golden opportunity. "Madam! Madam! The princess consort seeks you." A maid rushed in, calling out as she ran. Bella White's train of thought was interrupted. Not quite catching the maid's words, she frowned and snapped, "What's with the commotion? Have you no decorum?" "Madam, the princess consort is at Hibiscus Court, asking for you," the maid gasped, hand on her chest, catching her breath. "The princess consort? Grace Flowers?" Bella White bolted upright, questioning sharply. Seeing the maid nod vigorously, she wondered what Grace Flowers wanted. Then, she thought, this was a good opportunity to curry favor, avoiding the appearance of deliberately trying to ingratiate herself, which might draw mockery from the other concubines. With a bright smile, Bella White instructed, "Quickly, invite the princess consort in. Prepare the finest tea and pastries," she ordered the 2 maids fanning her. "Yes, madam," the 2 maids hastily set down their fans and went to make the arrangements. A moment later, Grace Flowers arrived, accompanied by Susie Green, followed by 2 rows of imposing guards with swords at their hips. Witnessing this display of imperial power, Bella White's resolve to marry Fiona Flowers into the royal family intensified. Her daughter, too, would one day return to her family home with such grandeur. Grace Flowers walked gracefully and slowly towards Bella White. "Greetings, Your Highness," Bella White and her maids bowed to Grace Flowers. Despite being her elder, Bella White had to observe proper etiquette and acknowledge Grace Flowers' rank as princess consort. "Rise," Grace Flowers said softly, gesturing towards Bella White before seating herself in a nearby chair. "Thank you, Your Highness." Bella White rose and, following Grace Flowers' gesture, sat opposite her, silently assessing the striking change in the young woman. In just 6 or 7 days, Grace Flowers seemed transformed. The previous meekness and helplessness had vanished completely. She now exuded confidence and nobility, her gaze carrying a hint of disdain, as if she held everything in contempt, yet possessing an aura that commanded respect. "Your Highness, there's no need for you to come personally. If you have any matters, just send a maid to inform me, and I'll come to Grace Flowers' garden to see you." Bella White withdrew her gaze, composed herself, and spoke quickly with a bright smile. Father has said that outsiders are not allowed to enter Grace Flower's garden without permission. Although I live here now, I, like Father, do not want irrelevant people disrupting the tranquility of this place." Grace Flowers smiled faintly, her words dripping with unconcealed sarcasm as she looked directly at Bella White's face, which, despite its age, still retained a trace of charm. This woman, with her venomous heart, the cruel memories of her were still deeply etched in Grace Flower's mind, making it impossible for her to show any kindness. Hearing Grace Flower's words, Bella White's face turned from white to green, her teeth grinding in suppressed anger. She forced a smile. This little bitch dared to be so arrogant, calling her an irrelevant person. Grace Flower's words hit a sore spot. Although she married into the Flowers family and was pampered, she knew that Henry Flowers' most beloved was still Grace Flower's mother. His heart was filled with her image, leaving no room for Bella White. That was also the reason why she always looked at Grace Flowers with disdain. In Henry Flowers' love, Bella White was merely an outsider. "I came to ask about something. In this Flowers household, for servants who have signed a contract of servitude, what procedures are required to redeem their contract?" Grace Flowers, seeing Bella White's suppressed anger, felt a sense of satisfaction. Making those who had bullied the original owner uncomfortable was her greatest pleasure. "Why does your Highness ask about this?" Bella White asked, puzzled. "You don't need to worry about that, just answer me." For decades, Henry Flowers had entrusted the household management to Bella White. The comings and goings of the servants were all decided by her. Therefore, if she wanted Nanny Wang and the others to leave the Flowers household with dignity, she had to negotiate with Bella White. Although she could use her status as a princess to directly ask Henry Flowers to release Nanny Wang, she didn't want to owe the Flowers family any favors. "If you want to redeem it, you just need to compensate 10 times the breach of contract fee stated in the contract." Knowing she couldn't confront Grace Flowers directly, Bella White answered obediently. "Very well. If I want to buy a few servants from the Flowers household, what would you think, concubine?" Grace Flowers nodded and asked further. "Your Highness wants to buy servants?" Bella White was stunned. Serenity Prince Mansion shouldn't lack servants, so why would Grace Flowers want to buy people from the Flowers household? She suddenly guessed that perhaps Grace Flowers wanted to find a few loyal servants from her maternal home for easier control later, so she hurriedly smiled and said, "If your Highness needs any servants, just tell me." "Taking people from your maternal home, why do you need to buy them? It sounds so distant. As the saying goes, eat someone's food, live under their roof." Giving a few servants to Grace Flowers could be seen as selling her a favor, making it difficult for her to refuse outright if there was a need to ask for something in the future. Bella White calculated meticulously. "No, I prefer fairness and clarity. If I said buy, then I must buy. I don't want to owe anyone any favors." Grace Flowers immediately shattered Bella White's scheme. Wanting her to owe a favor? No way. She wouldn't bother with such troublesome matters. "Your Highness doesn't need to be so formal with your maternal home. We are all family, there's no need to distinguish between public and private." Bella White didn't want to let such a good opportunity to curry favor slip away, so she hurriedly forced a smile, trying to persuade Grace Flowers. "Enough." Grace Flowers furrowed her brows, her deep voice cutting off Bella White's lengthy speech. Just 2 words, yet they carried an overwhelming force, startling Bella White into silence. "Since the princess consort insists on such formality, we shall comply." Bella White felt slapped by Grace Flowers' curt and blunt reply, her smile twisting into a strained grimace. She struggled to maintain the awkward expression. "Susie Green, compile a list of all the servants who have attended me. I intend to buy out their contracts." Grace Flowers turned slightly, instructing Susie Green. "Yes, Mississippi." Susie Green's face shone with unconcealed adoration for Grace Flowers. She hadn't realized her mistress possessed such an imposing presence. Seeing the second madam's displeasure, Susie Green almost clapped in delight. It was truly satisfying to witness her mistress effortlessly subdue the usually arrogant and domineering Bella White. Susie Green stepped forward, about to speak, but Bella White interrupted. "Hold on. I'll have someone fetch the steward. The servant's contracts are in his keeping." Susie Green, just inform the steward. Bella White, seeing no opportunity for flattery, delegated the task with evident disinterest. "All right. Tell the steward to gather all the necessary contracts and calculate the compensation for each. I will pay in gold and silver to redeem them." Grace Flowers rose, speaking calmly, then added to Susie Green, "Don't forget to include your own contract as well." "Oh, miss, do you mean, to buy my freedom too?" Susie Green's face lit up with joy. She hadn't expected to be included, thinking only older servants like Mama Wong would have the chance to leave the Flowers. "If you wish to remain at the Flowers, you needn't be redeemed." Grace Flowers smiled. She liked Susie Green's frankness, preferring those who didn't harbor resentment. Having such a person by her side was beneficial. "No, no, no. Redeem me, redeem me. I want to be free too." Susie Green shook her head vehemently. Those who served the young mistress were already ostracized by the other servants. She longed to leave. "Then go quickly." Grace Flowers addressed Bella White, "I expect the steward to deliver those contracts to Lu Hua Courtyard before dinner. I'll ensure the steward handles this swiftly." Bella White nodded hastily. Even if she wanted to obstruct Grace Flowers, she wouldn't do so over such a trivial matter. In Henry Flowers' eyes, Grace Flowers was no longer the neglected daughter. If she mishandled this and Grace Flowers complained, a reprimand would be the least of her worries. She could lose control of the household affairs to another concubine. She wouldn't risk such a loss. Grace Flowers allowed Susie Green to accompany the servant Bella White assigned to find the steward. She herself intended to stroll through the small courtyard where the original owner had once resided. After seeing Grace Flowers off, Bella White sat heavily on the settee, her face a mask of displeasure. She ground her teeth in frustration, sweeping the teacups and plates from the table onto the floor. The maidservants held their breath, fearing Bella White's wrath. "You slut, let's see how long you can remain arrogant." Bella White's face was fierce. She would definitely devise a way to force Grace Flowers to help. Bella White rubbed her chest, lay down on the chaise lounge, closed her eyes, and concealed the gloom within them. Hashtag Chapter 35, Counterproductive Assistant Serenity Courtyard was a secluded little courtyard within the Flowers estate. Though not large, under the care of the old servants, it was filled with flowers and herbs, along with a few vegetables, giving it the feel of a rural garden. Grace Flowers instructed the guards to wait at Serenity Courtyard's gate while she entered alone. It had probably been a week since the vegetables here had been watered, and with the hot weather, the leaves were slightly yellowed. If the original owner hadn't been constantly bullied by Bella White and her daughter, and harassed by the other concubines, life in this small courtyard would have been quite free and easy. Unfortunately, she was naturally timid and didn't know how to fight back, and being a talentless waste with zero martial arts cultivation, she was an easy target. With each step, memories flooded back, making Grace Flowers, despite being here for the first time, familiar with the place as if it were the back of her hand, thanks to the lingering memories. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from behind a large tree. Grace Flowers walked over and found Hua Zhi, the beautiful young man, sitting beneath the tree, leaning against the trunk, lost in thought. "Zhi, why are you here?" Grace Flowers had a good impression of this pure and kind young man, and seeing him here, she couldn't help but smile and ask. "Elder sister." Hua Zhi saw Grace Flowers and said with a cheerful smile, "I thought you and the prince had retired for the night. What were you thinking so deeply about?" Grace Flowers casually sat down next to Hua Zhi, leaning against the tree trunk, and asked casually. "Time flies so fast. It seems like in the blink of an eye, we've all grown up. Elder sister is married, and now even Fiona has to start thinking about marriage. Hua Zhizhi sighed. You're just a kid, stop acting like you've experienced everything. Grace Flowers found it hard to believe that a 16-year-old would say such things, but then again, 16 was just a child in the modern era. In this time, however, 16 was old enough to be a parent, so it made sense why Hua Zhizhi felt this way. Elder sister, it seems you're living well after marriage. Hua Zhizhi tilted his head, assessing Grace Flowers, and affirmed his conclusion, elder sister, you've changed a lot. Is that so? The weak and incompetent me who needed protection from a younger brother, that won't be happening anymore. Grace Flowers said with a laugh. Elder sister never used to laugh like that. Hua Zhizhi stared at Grace Flowers, whispering. Oh. Grace Flowers touched her face. Was she being too natural in front of Hua Zhizhi? After all, he must have been very familiar with the original owner. It's a very happy, confident, very beautiful laugh. Hua Zhizhi described how Grace Flowers' smile struck him. Before, even when she smiled, it was reserved, as if she would be punished for it. He always knew that elder sister's timidity and fear were due to the years of bullying from his mother and sister, which had left her traumatized. I've changed so much, don't you find it strange? Grace Flowers asked curiously. She actually wanted to ask if it seemed odd that she had changed so much in just a few days. No, elder sister is much better this way. Hua Zhizhi shook his head. Seeing his elder sister so radiant and confident made him happy for her. The guilt he felt for his mother and sister's treatment of her gradually dissipated. Hearing this, Grace Flowers laughed heartily. Children were indeed very adaptable. Hua Zhizhi could easily adapt to and accept her changes. By the way, elder sister, could I ask you a favor? Hua Zhizhi remembered what his mother had said to him at lunch, and he sighed, asking. What is it? Just tell me. Grace Flowers nodded. Regarding Fiona's marriage, Mother told me she wants to marry Fiona into the royal family, and she asked me to tell you so you could help inquire. Hua Zhizhi didn't hide anything, speaking frankly. You mean, you want me to find a match for Fiona? Grace Flowers looked at Hua Zhizhi, whose face was serious. No, on the contrary, I don't want Fiona to marry into the royal family. Seeing Grace Flowers' puzzled expression, Hua Zhizhi explained, Fiona's personality is too arrogant and unruly. Marrying into the royal family with all its rules, I'm afraid she'll cause trouble. Besides, she's from a martial arts family, and marrying into the royal family, I'm afraid she won't be valued. Grace Flowers was surprised. She didn't expect Hua Zhizhi, so young, to have such mature thoughts and foresight, and to be able to analyze how Fiona Flowers' arrogant personality was unsuitable for the royal family. Seeing Grace Flowers lost in thought without answering, Hua Zhizhi hurriedly said, Elder sister, promise me, don't find a match for Fiona. I don't want her to suffer in the future. After all, she's my only sister. I hope she'll marry someone from the Jianghu. That would probably suit her better. All right, I promise you. Grace Flowers was a little touched. What good fortune Fiona Flowers had to have a brother so devoted to her. She was an only child, without siblings, and sometimes envied those with many. Elder sister, thank you. Hua Zhizhi breathed a sigh of relief and smiled, as if as long as Grace Flowers didn't help Fiona Flowers marry into the royal family, her future would be happy and fulfilling. Looking at this pure young man, Grace Flowers suddenly felt that her plan to stay and take revenge for the original owner seemed difficult to carry out. Oh well, so as not to make things difficult for this young man, as long as Bella White and her daughter didn't cause trouble for her, she would let them be. You're welcome, but if they try anything behind my back, I might not hold back. Grace Flowers warned Hua Zhizhi in advance. She wasn't a saint and wouldn't endure Bella White and her daughters bullying indefinitely just for his sake. She would definitely give them a taste of their own medicine. They probably wouldn't dare to try anything with you anymore. After all, you're now a princess. Even if they had the intention, they wouldn't have the guts. Hua Zhizhi understood them well, but he didn't expect that once a woman became ruthless for whatever reason, she wouldn't care about the consequences. That's good then. Grace Flowers said with a smile. If they really do try anything behind elder sister's back, you can deal with them however you want, just don't take their lives. They should be taught a lesson, especially Fiona. Hua Zhizhi really couldn't stand Fiona Flowers being spoiled and unruly. She needed a lesson to straighten her out. If Fiona Flowers hears this, I'm afraid she'll risk her life against you. Grace Flowers laughed, clapping Hua Zhizhi on the shoulder in a carefree manner. Come on, let's walk around Serenity Courtyard. I probably won't be back here often. Elder sister, are you really not planning to come back and visit often? Hua Zhizhi stood up with Grace Flowers and asked reluctantly. Yes, but you can come to the prince's residence to find me. In this so-called home, the only thing worth my attachment is you. Grace Flowers nodded. The Flowers family was just a strange clan to her. Although she borrowed the original owner's body, the remaining memories of this body held no attachment to this family. Then I'll come and see elder sister often. Hua Zhizhi thought it was right. This house only brought elder sister suffering. She had been neglected by her father since childhood, allowing the other concubines and even the servants to bully her. All right, it's settled then. Grace Flowers thought having a younger brother in this time wouldn't be bad, so the more she looked at Hua Zhizhi, the more satisfied she felt. After leisurely strolling around Serenity Courtyard and revisiting all her memories of this small courtyard, Grace Flowers left, with Hua Zhizhi seeing her off, and returned to Flowing Flower Courtyard. As soon as she reached the archway of Flowing Flower Courtyard, she saw Susie Green standing there anxiously looking around. Seeing Grace Flowers, she breathed a sigh of relief and hurried over. Miss, you're back. Susie Green rushed to Grace Flowers' side and said urgently. What's wrong? Seeing Susie Green's panic, Grace Flowers frowned. Is something the matter? Nothing, miss. I was just worried because you were gone for so long. I wondered if someone was bullying you again, and I was about to go look for you. Susie Green carefully looked Grace Flowers over from head to toe, and seeing that she was all right, she smiled and replied. Chi Tri, you go back first, Grace Flowers said to Hua Chi Tri beside her. Yes, Hua Chi Tri nodded and turned to leave. How is the task I gave you going? Grace Flowers feared delays might complicate matters. Since she wasn't going to confront Bella White and her mother anymore, she planned to return to the prince's residence the next day and not stay at the Flowers. Before leaving, she had to settle the matter of the old servants. The task you entrusted to me, of course, must be done thoroughly. The contracts have been found, and the steward has calculated the severance pay for each contract and made a list for us. After speaking, Susie Green took a roll of paper from her bosom and handed it to Grace Flowers. Let's go inside first. Grace Flowers took the contracts and walked into Lu Hua Garden while looking them over. Arriving at a resting pavilion, Grace Flowers entered and sat down beside the stone table. A contract of servitude. 10 taels of silver sold their entire lives to the Flowers. 10 times the severance pay is 100 taels. People like you, living day by day on meager wages, could never save 100 taels in a lifetime. Grace Flowers looked at the figures on the contract and couldn't help but shake her head. Yes, miss. That much money, mine is even more, 200 taels. Susie Green frowned and gritted her teeth. Miss, why don't you just redeem Mama Wong and her family? I'm too expensive, too much of a burden. I'm still young, it doesn't matter where I am. Staying at the Flowers, I can still receive monthly wages. What are you worried about? Right now, I lack everything but money. The severance pay for all of you combined is less than 1,000 taels. For the third prince, it's a small matter. Grace Flowers put away the contracts and asked Susie Green, now, collecting this severance pay, it's also handled by the steward, right? Yes, it's all handled by the steward, Susie Green nodded. Go and call the steward to Lu Hua Garden. I'll go prepare the bank notes. Grace Flowers stood up and instructed Susie Green. Yes, I'll go right away. Susie Green happily walked out of the pavilion and ran off. Grace Flowers didn't carry much silver with her. The bank notes and loose silver that Yen Justin Lawrence gave her, she kept in a small box. Every time she went out, she would take some bank notes and loose silver and put them in a pouch, and this pouch was placed in her luggage. Returning to her bedroom, she retrieved her luggage, found the pouch, and took out everything inside to count. It was over 1,000 taels, but she only took out 6 or 7 banknotes, plus some loose silver. A rough calculation showed it was more than enough to pay the severance. Putting the money in her pouch, Grace Flowers walked out of the bedroom and sat in the pavilion outside, waiting for the steward to arrive. Not long after, Susie Green brought the steward over. Calculating the severance pay with the steward and paying it all in full, all procedures were completed in just over 10 minutes. All right, from now on, these people are no longer servants of the Flowers. Grace Flowers breathed a sigh of relief. She could finally help these old servants fulfill their wish of returning to their hometowns to enjoy their old age. Susie Green, go and call Mama Wong and her family here. Susie Green nodded and immediately went to call them. ####Chapter 36, Think About Something Decent. Nanny Wong, Uncle Lee, and several other elders quickly gathered at Susie Green's call. Grace Flowers instructed Susie Green to distribute a time-yellowed identity contract to each of them. Holding the contracts, the elders were moved to tears, simultaneously kneeling before Grace Flowers, choked with emotion. Nanny Wong, everyone, please get up. Grace Flowers was startled, hastily helping Nanny Wong and the others to their feet. Everyone has taken care of me for 18 years, now it's time for me to repay you. You can tear these contracts, from now on, everyone is free, no longer bound by the Flowers. Thank you, Miss, thank you, Mississippi. Nanny Wong wiped away the ceaseless flow of tears, repeatedly expressing her gratitude. Miss is truly our great benefactor, as kind as the madam. For decades, we haven't wanted to go anywhere, only wishing to raise Miss to adulthood. Now, seeing Miss marry into a good family, we have no regrets. Uncle Lee's hands trembled, though illiterate, he was very familiar with this contract, bearing his fingerprint. Don't say that, it's been hard on everyone these past years. Because of caring for me, you were ostracized and scorned by the other concubines, even having to go hungry. Grace Flowers recalled the vegetable garden by the green language courtyard. It was because their expenses were the lowest that they had to grow their own vegetables and fruits to save money. Susie Green held the contract, but wasn't happy, on the contrary, she frowned. What's wrong? Grace Flowers looked at Susie Green, seeing her dejected expression, and asked doubtfully. Miss, I've left the Flowers, and I don't know where to go. Susie Green crumpled the contract, her usually optimistic small face showing a hint of bewilderment. You're 17 this year, aren't you? It seemed Susie Green was only a year younger than her. Yes. Susie Green nodded. Then it's time to get married. Your parents must be worried about your marriage, why don't you go home and let them find a good match for you? Grace Flowers said with a smile. Women of this era, no, all women of ancient times, the most important thing in life was to marry a good man. Now, Susie Green was in the prime of her youth, with the greatest opportunity to choose. Choosing carefully this year could lead to marrying a good man and living a good life. I'm an orphan. Susie Green lowered her head, speaking softly. Susie Green, come to our house. You can be my granddaughter, and I'll find a good match for you. Nanny Wong said. Susie Green was a child abandoned in their village, previously adopted by a childless widow. After the widow fell ill and died, while also wanting to find a companion of the same age for Grace Flowers, she brought Susie Green to the flowers. Hearing Nanny Wang's arrangement, Susie Green didn't seem happy, but hesitant. Is there a problem? Seeing Susie Green's hesitation, Grace Flowers gently said, if you have something to say, just say it. If I can help you, I definitely will. Miss, can I continue to serve by your side? Susie Green was full of expectation, but also knew that entering the Yen Prince's mansion required passing many tests. It wouldn't be that easy for her to enter. Wouldn't finding a good man to marry at Nanny Wang's place be a better arrangement for you? Why do you still want to be a maid? Grace Flowers asked, puzzled. She thought that for women of this era, the most important thing in their lives was what they worried about most. I haven't thought about marriage yet, Mississippi. I just want to serve by your side. Susie Green shook her head, her expression resolute. If you truly think so, then of course, it's good. You can come with me to the Yen Prince's mansion as a companion. Grace Flowers, seeing that Susie Green truly had nowhere to go, thought about how she needed someone familiar with the place to guide her in getting accustomed to the environment. Since Susie Green had been by the previous Grace Flowers' side since childhood and was loyal to her, it was the best choice. Thank you, Miss, thank you, Mississippi. Susie Green's eyes lit up with joy. She didn't want to marry so early, only wanting to see more of the world. Nanny Wang, Uncle Lee, everyone pack your things. Stay here tonight, and tomorrow you can leave the flowers and return to your hometown. Grace Flowers said, then turned to Susie Green, you pack your things too, we'll probably depart for the Yen Prince's mansion tomorrow. Nanny Wang and the others joyfully went to pack their belongings. Grace Flowers stretched, a smile playing on her lips. Finally, one matter was settled. She could leave the flowers without any further worries and would have no further connection to it. An arm reached out from behind, embracing her slender waist, a deep, mellow voice sounding in her ear. Little lass, you're quite busy, leaving your husband aside. Don't you feel any remorse? Justin Lawrence rested his chin on Grace Flowers' thin shoulder, feeling only bone beneath. He couldn't help but frown. This little lass was all skin and bones, he'd have to nourish her well back home. I didn't tell you to stay. Grace Flowers shrugged, taking the opportunity to push away Justin Lawrence's chin from her shoulder. The overly intimate posture gave her the illusion that they were a harmonious couple. In reality, they only had a physical relationship, a title, but could only be considered strangers with a slight acquaintance. Heartless little lass, such a waste of my worry for you. Justin Lawrence just chuckled at Grace Flowers' blunt words, leading her to the stone table to sit down. Grace Flowers looked at the guards standing like wooden statues in the distance, her tone slightly sarcastic. Why aren't you afraid of your guards discovering you're perfectly healthy now? They are my confidants, they know I'm actually very healthy. Justin Lawrence said with a smile. Pretending like that, is it difficult, or difficult, or difficult? Grace Flowers was very curious about this. Maintaining the facade of illness from a healthy state, even having to exhibit symptoms, was truly a difficult skill. But Justin Lawrence seemed to do it with ease, without any difficulty, truly making her admire him greatly, proving the truth, life is like a play, it all depends on acting. Very difficult, my little princess. Do you want to use some method to comfort my hardship? Justin Lawrence leaned closer, his face only a hand's breadth from Grace Flowers. Get lost, get lost. Grace Flowers blushed, hurriedly pushing away Justin Lawrence's handsome face, which captivated all women, even men, to avoid being seduced, lost in his beauty and unable to extricate herself. Little lass, you'll make me want to carry you to bed. Justin Lawrence looked at the blushing, stammering Grace Flowers, laughing heartily. This was the first time he saw this strong, decisive little lass blush and become flustered, and it was all because of him. This made his satisfied smile deepen. Pervert, can't your mind think of anything decent? Grace Flowers glared at Justin Lawrence, truly a pervert whose mind was full of wicked thoughts. Trust me, right now, carrying you to bed is the most decent thing for me. Justin Lawrence chuckled, lowering his head, nuzzling against Grace Flowers' soft, white neck, brushing aside her hair, and kissing her neck. Ah, are you a vampire? Get away from me. Grace Flowers cried out, feeling a sharp pain in her neck. I must leave my mark on you, to prove you're mine. Justin Lawrence raised his head, looking at the small, bright red love bite on Grace Flowers' fair neck, very satisfied. He was a man with a strong possessive desire. Once he determined this little lass was his, he absolutely wouldn't allow others to covet her. Humph, I am me, I cannot be yours. Grace Flowers scolded softly, covering her neck, glaring at Justin Lawrence. Her clear eyes held a strong resolve, her tone calm yet undeniably firm. I am not your possession, Justin Lawrence. I won't let you become my possession, I will let you become the woman who stands by my side. Justin Lawrence stopped joking, gazing intently at Grace Flowers. I don't need an obedient woman, I want you to be you, including everything about you. Grace Flowers froze. Justin Lawrence's star-like eyes were like a bottomless sea with raging storms, seemingly wanting to suck her soul in. A tremor arose in her heart, she slightly opened her mouth, but didn't know how to respond. Suddenly, Justin Lawrence's face turned pale, his domineering aura instantly becoming gentle and harmless. He suddenly leaned on Grace Flowers' shoulder, coughing, as if a chronic illness had suddenly relapsed, startling Grace Flowers. Grace Flowers was about to ask him what was wrong. Justin Lawrence's voice rang in her ear, someone's coming. Sure enough, Grace Flowers looked towards the door, a little maid was entering. She couldn't help but be surprised, Justin Lawrence had actually detected the other person before they appeared, and the maid's footsteps were quite light. His hearing was even better than hers. Cough, cough, Justin Lawrence leaned weakly on Grace Flowers, coughing until his face was flushed. Grace Flowers, while the maid hadn't approached yet, glared at him. Just now, seeing Justin Lawrence's sudden paleness and weak breathing had startled her, almost fooling her. His acting could be said to be superb, reaching the peak of perfection. Your Highness, Princess, dinner is ready, the old master invites you to the dining room. The little maid looked at Justin Lawrence coughing and wheezing, a trace of sympathy flashed in her eyes. It turned out that the third prince was really very ill. All right, you can go down first. Grace Flowers nodded, waving her hand to dismiss the maid. Justin Lawrence wasn't wearing his bamboo hat now, so he kept his back to the maid, his head resting on Grace Flowers' shoulder, to avoid facing the maid. Yes, Mississippi. The little maid's curious eyes occasionally peeked at Justin Lawrence, but unfortunately, she only saw the back of his neck. She reluctantly turned and left, thinking she could see the mysterious third prince's face this time, but unexpectedly, she still couldn't. After the maid had gone some distance, Grace Flowers pushed Justin Lawrence, who was taking the opportunity to nuzzle her neck, away, angrily saying, "They're gone, no need to pretend anymore." Hashtag Chapter 37, The son-in-law arrives uninvited. Justin Lawrence sat up straight, a lingering taste on his lips as he smirked, snapping his fingers. A guard immediately appeared, holding a conical leaf hat. Your Highness. The guard respectfully presented the hat to Justin Lawrence. Let's go. Justin Lawrence donned the hat, taking Grace Flowers' hand and rising. Grace Flowers nodded, stepping out the door. In the dining room, only Henry Flowers, Bella White, along with Hoa Chi Tri and Fiona Flowers stood beside the table. Although Bella White's status was equivalent to the legal wife, managing all internal affairs within the Flowers estate, she was still only the second wife. The position of the first wife of the Flowers, even though Grace Flowers' mother had passed away 18 years ago, was not hers to claim. Thus, Bella White resented Grace Flowers' mother and consequently took out her anger on Grace Flowers. Your Highness, Your Highness. Seeing Grace Flowers assisting Justin Lawrence as they slowly entered, Henry Flowers and the others hastily bowed. "Sit." Justin Lawrence settled into the head seat, speaking casually. After Grace Flowers sat down, Henry Flowers led his family in taking their seats. Bella White and her daughter occasionally glanced at Grace Flowers with envious eyes. "Simple fare, I hope your highness doesn't mind." Henry Flowers gestured towards the food on the table, smiling. "Why does your highness keep wearing that hat? It's inconvenient to eat like that, why not take it off?" Fiona Flowers suddenly spoke, her beautiful eyes looking directly at Justin Lawrence without hesitation. Justin Lawrence acted as if he hadn't heard Fiona Flowers, remaining silent and picking up his chopsticks. He took the first bite, not placing it in his own bowl, but into Grace Flowers' bowl beside him. "You're too thin, eat more." This single sentence caused the expressions of everyone at the table to shift. Henry Flowers and his son, seeing Justin Lawrence's attentiveness towards Grace Flowers, were quite pleased, smiling at the newlywed couple. As for Bella White and her daughter, they were displeased by Justin Lawrence ignoring Fiona Flowers, and even more irritated by the affection shown to Grace Flowers. Grace Flowers' lips curved slightly, a hint of mockery in her eyes as she glanced at everyone at the table. She didn't speak, only lowering her head to eat what Justin Lawrence had given her. Fiona Flowers, noticing Grace Flowers' mocking glance, gritted her teeth, about to speak, but Bella White pulled her hand, signaling her to stay quiet. "Indeed, Fiona is right. Your Highness, why not remove your hat while dining? After all, we are family, there's no need for such formalities." Bella White also spoke up, offering advice. Justin Lawrence's response to Bella White was the same as it had been to Fiona Flowers, complete disregard. He continued to occasionally and attentively pick food for Grace Flowers. Grace Flowers sighed softly, looking at her bowl piled high with food, under the laser-like stares of Bella White and her daughter. How could she possibly eat? Justin Lawrence was clearly here to make her the target of their resentment, ruining her appetite. "People are talking to you, why aren't you responding?" Grace Flowers poked at the food with her chopsticks, addressing Justin Lawrence. Did he have to be so aloof, ignoring Bella White and her daughter, effectively slapping them in the face? "Busy serving you food, no time to answer. Be good, eat quickly. Do you want this prince to feed you?" While cold and aloof towards Bella White and her daughter, Justin Lawrence was the complete opposite with Grace Flowers, showering her with affection. His words nearly caused everyone at the table's jaws to drop. Shivering 3 times, Grace Flowers brushed off the goosebumps that covered her, feeling her hackles rise, and cursed inwardly, what was this lecherous Justin Lawrence trying to do? Was such a dramatic performance necessary? Was he trying to portray a passionate marital affection? Grace is truly blessed to have married such a loving husband. If your mother knew in the afterlife, she would surely be overjoyed. Henry Flowers smiled comfortingly. Mentioning Grace Flowers' mother, his stern face softened, but a pang of grief flickered in his eyes. Henry Flowers' words came from the bottom of his heart. Grace Flowers looked up at him. From an outsider's perspective, although he had been indifferent to the original owner since childhood, failing to fulfill his responsibilities as a father, the reason behind it must have been due to her mother's death during childbirth. He held some resentment towards the original owner. She could clearly see Henry Flowers' deep affection for her mother, and it was because he was afraid of seeing his daughter and being reminded of his deceased wife that he had always been cold towards the original owner. "Grace, for the past 18 years, you have suffered because of my neglect. From now on, if you need anything, just tell me, and I will try my best to fulfill it." Henry Flowers looked at Grace Flowers, feeling even more remorseful towards his daughter. Thinking back, he felt ashamed towards his deceased wife. "Yes, I remember." Grace Flowers nodded. She wouldn't be foolish enough to refuse help offered to her, who knows, she might really need Henry Flowers' help later. Bella White and her daughter watched the heartwarming father-daughter affection between Henry Flowers and Grace Flowers, their faces growing even more unsightly. Especially Fiona Flowers, who had always monopolized Henry Flowers' affection. Now that Henry Flowers was showing such concern for Grace Flowers, she felt a pang of jealousy, as if her father's love had been stolen, making her face darken and unable to remain calm. "All right, let's eat." Henry Flowers picked up his chopsticks again and said with a smile. The meal was truly filled with undercurrents. Bella White and her daughter kept wanting Justin Lawrence to take off his hat, and it was unclear what they were planning. It was certainly not just simple curiosity about his appearance. After dinner was finished and everything was cleared, hot tea was served. Suddenly, hurried footsteps sounded from outside the door, and the butler rushed in, his face a mixture of shock and uncertainty. "What is it? Why are you so flustered?" Henry Flowers frowned, looking at the usually meticulous butler rushing in, and couldn't help but ask suspiciously. "Outside the door, there's a small child saying that the prince and princess are their parents, and they want to come in and see them." The butler wiped the cold sweat from his face, and seeing Henry Flowers' surprised expression, he quickly explained, "I've never heard of the prince having any children, and our young miss just got married, how could she have a child? Naturally, I didn't believe it and told the child to leave, but the child refused to go and even injured our guards." "What? A child was able to injure our guards?" Henry Flowers was shocked. The guards in the Flowers residence were all experts from the third rank and above, yet they were injured by a child. This was hard to believe. "Yes, and it was several guards who joined forces against that child. Our guards were all injured." The butler was also astonished. He had never seen a child with such nimble movements, surpassing even adults, and that strange martial art, he had never seen anything like it before. Insolent! A child like that injuring my guards? Remarkable, a true prodigy. Why block him at the gate? The Flowers have always cherished talent. Bring the boy in. Henry Flowers, a seasoned man, quickly regained his composure. He was already calculating how to recruit this child. Such a martial arts genius would undoubtedly solidify the Flowers' position as the foremost noble family in the Jianghu. But, that little boy claims the prince and princess are his parents. I feared offending their royal highnesses, so, the steward hesitated, glancing at Justin Lawrence, whose face was hidden by a conical hat. He then turned to Grace Flowers. "Go on, bring him in. He is indeed our son." Grace Flowers smiled, pleased. It seemed Jason's training with the 3 secret manuals had significantly improved his martial arts. "Excellent. What? Grace, you..." Henry Flowers was even more astonished than when he heard about the injured guards. He assumed Grace Flowers was joking, but she seemed entirely serious. Not only Henry Flowers, but everyone in the hall, except Justin Lawrence, stared at Grace Flowers in disbelief. When did the eldest daughter acquire a son? The third prince didn't deny her words, deepening the shock. Could this boy outside truly be their son? "If you don't bring Jason in quickly, you'll have more injured guards." Grace Flowers spoke calmly, unconcerned by the others' astonishment. She felt no obligation to explain her son's existence to irrelevant people. Understanding Grace Flowers' implied command, the steward hurried out without delay. "Grace, what is going on?" Henry Flowers asked urgently, while the others strained to hear her explanation. "Nothing. It is as it seems." Grace Flowers sipped her tea, ignoring the expectant gazes. "Oh, sister, you've only been married a few days. How can you have a son? Did you perhaps have him with someone else before the wedding?" Fiona Flowers, seeing her father's displeasure, couldn't resist a spiteful jab. "Fiona! What are you saying?" Hua Zhizhi frowned, scolding Fiona Flowers sharply. "It's true, isn't it? Didn't you hear her say the boy outside is her son? Which word did I say wrong? Am I slandering her?" Never having been scolded like this, Fiona Flowers' temper flared. Ignoring Bella White's warning glance, she foolishly continued, "Sister doesn't care about her actions, so why should you?" "Oh. And what actions are those?" Grace Flowers raised an eyebrow, her expression calm as she questioned Fiona Flowers. Fiona Flowers was about to retort when a childish voice from the doorway interrupted her. Chapter 38, try moving. All eyes turned towards the sound. A small boy, about 4 years old, walked in ahead of the steward. Upon seeing his face, everyone gasped. They looked at the boy, then back at Grace Flowers. He shared at least a 5-point resemblance to her. "Look, this little brat looks just like you, sis. Anyone can see the blood relation. Isn't he your bastard child with some wild man?" Fiona Flowers, upon seeing Jason Lawrence's face, immediately thought she had Grace Flowers cornered. Ignoring Justin Lawrence's presence, she smugly assumed she'd exposed Grace Flowers's shameful secret. "Fiona, shut up." Henry Flowers roared at Fiona Flowers. "Why yell at me? I'm not the one who birthed a bastard with some random guy. If you want to yell, yell at her." Scolded by Henry Flowers, Fiona Flowers grew even more unrestrained, shouting back defiantly. "What a stupid woman." Jason Lawrence picked at his ear, curling his lip in disdain as he looked at Fiona Flowers. His childish voice, though young, carried clearly as he tossed out the insult. He then ran towards Grace Flowers. Called an idiot by a child, Fiona Flowers became even angrier. Her pretty face twisted in a grimace as she yelled at Jason Lawrence, "You little punk, who are you calling stupid?" "I'm calling you stupid. You are stupid. Everyone knows I'm talking about you, and you still ask. Compared to my mother, your intelligence is truly pathetic." Jason Lawrence stuck out his tongue, deliberately provoking Fiona Flowers. "Pfft." The servants, hearing the child's amusingly blunt assessment, couldn't help but burst into laughter. You little punk, how dare you call this young miss stupid?" Fiona Flowers, rendered speechless by Jason Lawrence's words, was fuming with rage. Hearing Fiona Flowers repeatedly call Jason a little punk, Grace Flowers's eyes turned icy, the smile vanishing from her face. Turning to Fiona Flowers, her voice, though calm, carried an undeniable weight. "What did you just call my son?" she asked coldly. "I called him a little punk, so what? He's the little punk you had with some wild man." Fiona Flowers glared at Jason Lawrence, who was still making faces at her. She wished she could march over and slap the little punk. "Fiona, be quiet." Bella White, seeing Grace Flowers's darkening expression, feared for her daughter and quickly intervened. "Say that again." Grace Flowers's gaze pierced Fiona Flowers like arrows. The teacup in her hand tilted, slowly spilling tea onto the table. As the tea flowed, her voice remained soft, a faint smile playing on her lips. But that smile didn't reach her eyes, and it sent a shiver of fear down everyone's spines. I said he's, Fiona Flowers finally looked at Grace Flowers, but the faintly smiling yet murderous face terrified her. She no longer dared to utter the words, "little punk," stammering instead. Under Grace Flowers's deepening smile, a chill ran down her spine, and she instinctively stumbled backward. Such a pretty little mouth, yet it speaks such thoughtless words. Grace Flowers set down her teacup and ran a slender finger along the spilled tea on the table. Shifting her gaze to the puddle, she asked softly, "Although your parents are here, as your elder sister, shouldn't I discipline you in their stead, so you'll remember this lesson?" What are you going to do?" Though no longer under Grace Flowers's direct gaze, Fiona Flowers still felt a chill down her spine. Trying to stand tall, she mustered her courage, but her voice still trembled. I warn you, don't you dare touch me." "Is that so?" Grace Flowers idly trailed a finger through the water. "And if I were to touch you, what would you do?" A chilling aura emanated from Grace Flowers, yet her soft voice and the faint smile playing on her lips only amplified the tension. From Henry Flowers down to the lowliest servant, everyone held their breath, stifled by the oppressive atmosphere. Some of the more timid servants trembled, subtly shifting away from Fiona Flowers, fearing they might become collateral damage. You, Fiona Flowers frantically looked towards Henry Flowers, only then realizing that aside from her mother, the servants had vanished. Grace, Fiona is, Henry Flowers couldn't bear to see his pampered daughter so terrified. Witnessing Fiona Flowers, usually arrogant and fearless, now cowering and pleading for help, he hastily intervened. Though unsure of Grace Flowers' intended punishment, the serene composure she displayed unnerved him. Before Henry Flowers could finish, Fiona Flowers shrieked, collapsing to her knees, clutching them with her hands, her face ashen with pain. "Does it hurt?" Grace Flowers flicked away the remaining water droplets on her fingertips, her voice indifferent. Everyone, including Justin Lawrence, stared at Grace Flowers in astonishment. With a flick of her wrist, she had propelled 2 droplets of water towards Fiona Flowers. The speed and force were such that even Fiona Flowers, a 4th-tier cultivator, couldn't evade them. To inflict injury with something as soft and formless as water, and upon a 4th-tier martial artist no less, with such ease. Just how profound had Grace Flowers' martial arts become? "Grace, my child, since when did you know martial arts?" Henry Flowers' attention had completely shifted from the pale, sweating Fiona Flowers to Grace Flowers, who had deftly used water droplets as weapons. His initial shock morphed into elation. He had always believed his eldest daughter to be a martial arts cripple, destined to pass his medical legacy to Hua Zhi and his siblings. But unexpectedly, Grace Flowers' martial arts surpassed even Fiona Flowers. "When I learned martial arts is irrelevant. What matters is that you teach Fiona Flowers a lesson. My patience is thin, and I can't guarantee I won't take Fiona Flowers' life." Grace Flowers spoke coldly, pulling Jason Lawrence to her side. Her gaze swept across everyone in the hall, her voice a clear warning, "This is my son. He is far more precious than any of you. So, let me hear no more slanderous rumors about him. If I do, there will be consequences." What have you done to Fiona?" Bella White tried to help Fiona Flowers up, but found her legs unresponsive. "Mother, my legs feel broken. It hurts so much." Fiona Flowers cried, glaring at Grace Flowers. But under Grace Flowers' impassive gaze, she dared not utter any insults. "I went easy on you this time. 10 days to half a month in bed, and you'll be able to walk again." Grace Flowers rose, a faint smile playing on her lips. "If I ever hear you slander my son again, it won't be just 10 days to half a month. You'll be bedridden for life." Her gentle smile juxtaposed with her ruthless words sent a chill down the spines of the surrounding servants, effectively silencing them with fear. Jason Lawrence coughed lightly, breaking the silence that had fallen over the hall. He rose, addressing Henry Flowers with a chilling detachment, "Out of respect for you, I will overlook Fiona Flowers' reckless slander against my child's honor this time. Next time, even if the princess consort chooses to ignore it, I will not." Yes, your highness, please calm your anger. I will discipline Fiona thoroughly." Henry Flowers, a man of high standing in the Jianghu, had never been so berated in front of his servants and family. Shame washed over him, his face alternating between pale and livid. Yet, given Justin Lawrence's status, he dared not show his displeasure. Even without raising his voice, Justin Lawrence's imposing, noble presence quelled any thought of defiance. "Father, let's retire." Grace Flowers took Jason Lawrence's hand, not forgetting to solicitously support the seemingly frail Justin Lawrence as they gracefully departed. Only after Grace Flowers' family had left did the tension in the hall finally dissipate. Servants wiped cold sweat from their brows. Despite the sweltering July heat, the hall had felt like an ice cellar just moments ago. Those 3, they were truly devils, utterly terrifying. How could they have ever thought Grace Flowers was meek, useless, and easy to bully. The servants shuddered, recalling their past mistreatment of her. If she decided to settle the score, they wouldn't be left with even a scrap of bone. They desperately wished for her swift departure, dreading the thought of living in constant fear of becoming her next plaything. Fiona, think before you speak next time. You've utterly humiliated me. Henry Flowers, consumed by disappointment and rage, roared at Fiona Flowers. With a flick of his sleeve, he stormed off, leaving her sitting on the floor. Master! Bella White called out, unable to bear watching Henry Flowers' retreating figure. Don't bother him now. He's furious and in a difficult position. Fiona, you caused him to be reprimanded by the prince. When will you grow up? Hua Ji intercepted Bella White, preventing her from calling Henry Flowers back. He crouched beside Fiona Flowers, his voice laced with weary exasperation. Mind your own business. You're probably delighted to see me humiliated by that bitch, aren't you? Having been scolded repeatedly by her father, a man who had never raised his voice at her before, all because of Grace Flowers, Fiona Flowers now seethed with hatred for her. It was all Grace Flowers' fault, all her fault for this humiliation. Elder sister should have been even harsher in teaching you a lesson. Hua Ji, initially intending to carry the immobile Fiona Flowers back to her room, now rose angrily. Hearing her unrepentant words, he abandoned her and turned to leave. Mother, I want to kill that bitch, Grace Flowers. Seeing her father and brother, the two people who had always adored her, abandon her with her injured leg, Fiona Flowers clenched her fists, pounding the floor in a fit of rage, her face contorted with hatred. Grace Flowers won't be so smug for long. She's only acting so brazenly in the flowers because of the third prince's favor. Humph, just you wait. One day, I'll make her life a living hell. Bella White glared in the direction Grace Flowers had left, her hands clenched so tightly that the veins bulged on her knuckles. Her beautiful face was now a mask of malice. Bella White stood, addressing the servants, take the young mistress back to her room. Be careful, don't injure her further. Yes, second madam. Several sturdy maidservants hurried forward, carefully lifting Fiona Flowers and carrying her toward her chambers. The commotion ended just like that. The dining hall, previously gloomy and heavy, finally regained its quiet after everyone had left. Chapter 39, Abandoning a Child is Illegal. Justin Lawrence, upon arriving at Grace Flowers' estate, shed his facade of frailty, embraced her, and tossed his ceremonial hat aside. Little minx, when did your martial arts become so formidable? He was utterly astonished by her technique of weaponizing water droplets. He'd known she practiced martial arts, but her inner strength had seemed unremarkable. In the Great Jin dynasty, martial arts were commonplace, the difference lay in proficiency. But to inflict injury with mere water required profound inner strength. Fiona Flowers' injury testified to Grace Flowers' power, far exceeding his expectations. How had she achieved such strength in mere days? It baffled him. Don't forget, I'm a martial arts prodigy. Serious training is child's play for me. Don't be too surprised, I'll astound you further later. Grace Flowers said, smiling. Mother, father, why didn't you tell Justin you weren't coming home? Were you planning to run away and abandon me? Abandoning a child is illegal, the fuzz will haul you in for tea. Jason Lawrence pouted, tugging at Grace Flowers' hand, his small face full of displeasure. He'd eagerly awaited their return, to no avail. The fuzz? Who is Justin talking about? Justin Lawrence frowned, puzzled by Jason Lawrence's mention of a mysterious police officer. Ah, I forgot to tell someone to inform Justin we'd be staying at the Flowers for a few days. My apologies, my oversight. Grace Flowers suddenly remembered telling Justin she'd return tonight, then changing her mind without informing him. Did you come here alone from the prince's estate? Justin Lawrence, seeing Jason Lawrence unaccompanied, inquired, then recalled the child had injured all of the Flowers' guards. Such skill couldn't be underestimated, further adding to his astonishment. When did Jason Lawrence become so powerful? The steward brought me. He only left after I was inside. Jason Lawrence shook his head. He'd wanted to come alone, but the steward insisted on escorting him. Son, it seems your martial arts are also improving. Keep practicing diligently at home, no slacking.